C1428 The First Celestial Emperor. Chapter 1428 The First Celestial Emperor 1428 The First Celestial Emperor, Messenger from the Celestial Palace. What purpose do you have here in my city? Xian spoke as he gazed upon the messenger from his seat. The messenger looked at Xian's arrogant presence with a slight frown on his face, but he refrained from saying anything as his mission was to recruit Xian. I am here on behalf of His Majesty, the Celestial Emperor, the messenger said as he retrieved a scroll and unsealed it. Xian, one recognized as the god of war, immortal of the battlefield, your war stories have reached even I, the first Celestial Emperor, Emperor of the Divine Heavens. As an admirer of your indomitable presence on the battlefield, I hereby offer you a position in my celestial army as its Supreme General. As the Supreme General, you will have unimaginable authority within the army, second only to I, the Celestial Commander. Should you accept this position, I shall grant you unlimited wealth, unfathomable power, widespread fame, as well as any single wish within my authority as the ruler of the divine heaven. Xian listened to the Celestial Emperor's message with a nonchalant expression on his face. If it were anybody else in his shoes, they would have been jumping up and down in excitement over such a generous offer. The position of Celestial Emperor came into existence about 100,000 years ago when the patriarch of the most powerful family in the divine heaven decided to rule over the divine heaven. Despite facing considerable opposition from various factions and individuals who questioned the idea of bestowing such immense power and authority upon a single individual, the patriarch had an equal amount of support from those who stood to gain from it. Thus, the Celestial Emperor came into existence with half of the divine heaven against it and the other half supporting it. With the passage of time, the influence of the Celestial Emperor extended its reach, gradually engulfing the entire divine heaven. The power of the Celestial Emperor grew to such an extent that defiance against it became an act of inevitable self-destruction, as his enemies faced swift and merciless judgment, leaving little room for opposition or resistance. The unchecked power and authority wielded by the Celestial Emperor became a tool for exploitation, not only by the Emperor himself but also by those who surrounded him, leading to corruption and manipulation on an unprecedented scale. Under the dominion of the Celestial Emperor, cultivation resources, precious treasures, and even the natural phenomena of the world fell under its exclusive control. Those who did not submit to its authority were barred from accessing these vital assets, forcing all to pledge allegiance or face deprivation. In response to the tyrannical rule of the Celestial Emperor, countless individuals came together and challenged its oppressive regime, sparking the conflict known as the Heavenly War of Immortals and Gods. The Heavenly War of Immortals and Gods lasted for tens of thousands of years and was nearing its end with the Celestial Emperor having the upper hand. However, the Celestial Emperor was impatient and wanted to end the war as soon as possible, so he sought out Xian, a renowned warlord who had risen to prominence less than 1,000 years ago, intrigued by tales of his achievements. However, after receiving the Celestial Emperor's offer, Xian scoffed inwardly at the messenger and spoke in a calm manner, I don't need such an exalted position, so I will have to decline his offer. Xian actually wanted to curse out the messenger and the Celestial Emperor, but he refrained from doing so. Enraged by Xian's refusal, the messenger's composure shattered, his voice booming with rage, You arrogant little bastard! How dare you refuse the Celestial Emperor's generous offer? You are just a nobody from some backwater background. How dare you? Dong Yi, who was standing beside Xian, immediately drew his sword and pointed it at the messenger. However, Xian quickly gestured for Dong Yi to stop and said, Indeed, I am a nobody, a frog in a well. Therefore, it wouldn't make any sense for me to accept the Celestial Emperor's offer. You may return to the Celestial Emperor and tell him that. Good. You will regret this. The messenger did not linger and immediately left. I knew the Celestial Emperor would make a move on us eventually. Xian sighed afterward. The Celestial Emperor is truly overbearing and arrogant. Even his lackeys are disgusting. I completely understand why there is a war against him right now. Dong Yi sneered in disdain. Prepare the army just in case they want to start something. We will most likely see that messenger again. Xian said a moment later. As you command. Dong Yi bowed before leaving. True to expectations, several weeks later, the messenger returned with another offer. However, it was a far cry from the previous one. Instead of the prestigious position of Supreme General, the Celestial Emperor now offered Xian the humble role of a foot soldier, a drastic downgrade from his initial proposal. Xian laughed at the offer and made a soldier turn away the messenger without even seeing him. The messenger returned a month later, but this time there was no offer to negotiate. The Celestial Emperor's message was clear and ominous. Either Xian worked for him or faced utter destruction. In response to the threat, Xian killed the messenger and sent his decapitated head back to the Celestial Palace. A week later, hundreds of Celestial Emperor's soldiers showed up at the front gate with the intention of going to war with them. Naturally, Xian had prepared for the Celestial Emperor's confrontation and led his army to face their enemies, quickly slaughtering them. Xian's refusal to bow to the Celestial Emperor quickly became the talk of the divine heaven, reigniting the flames of the dying heavenly war. After experiencing Xian's prowess firsthand, the Celestial Emperor quickly realized that had been trying to tame an uncontrollable monster, deeply regretting it. C1429 The Birth of Evil God. Chapter 1429 The Birth of Evil God 1429 The Birth of Evil God. Why, Your Majesty? That arrogant bastard slew the soldiers we sent again. At this rate, we'll lose all of our spare soldiers to him. The current Supreme General of the Celestial Army reported to the Celestial Emperor. Frustration clenched the Celestial Emperor's teeth together. If not for the diversion of his main army in the heavenly war of immortals and gods, he could have easily crushed Xian. But alas, his only option was to dispatch his reserve forces, as his enemies could potentially change the tide of their war if he weakened his main army even slightly. It's been 6 years since Xian openly defied the Celestial Emperor. Tens of thousands of soldiers from the Celestial Emperor had perished to Xian, who was only becoming more formidable with every fight. If I don't take care of this little bastard soon, he'll definitely become a real thorn in my side. The Celestial Emperor wanted to recruit Xian to end the war quicker, but he ended up making Xian an enemy, who now had the potential to prolong the war. The realization that Xian could be the catalyst for his downfall drove the Celestial Emperor to the brink of madness. How dare a mere city lord defy me, the Celestial Emperor? Supreme General, I don't care what it takes or how much you dirty your hands. I want that bastard to despair. I want him to regret defying me. While you distract him with some soldiers, sneak into the city and remove his loved ones from existence. The Celestial Emperor roared, his eyes bloodshot. As your Majesty commands. The Supreme General did not have an ounce of hesitation within his voice despite being given such an order. The following month, 10,000 soldiers arrived at the city of Xian, looking more ominous than ever. When Xian saw this, he immediately left the city to confront them as usual. Of course, he left behind some soldiers to guard the city and his beloved wife just in case. Unfortunately, the Supreme General was an existence that even Xian's strongest soldiers had no hopes of defeating in a group. Thus, the Supreme General sneaked into the city of Xian without alerting anyone, located Xian's living quarters, and silently killed all of the soldiers guarding it, before entering the building. Inside, a woman sat on the bed, silently caressing her round stomach that looked like it was about to burst at any moment. Who's there? Xiaomei was immediately alerted when the formation around the building was suddenly destroyed. The door to her room was kicked down the next second, and a figure soaked in blood casually walked inside, his weapon still dripping with blood. Who are you? Xiaomei could instantly tell at a glance that she was no match for this individual and that she had no hopes of escaping. I am your executioner, said the Supreme General in a cold voice. Why are you doing this? She asked. Because your husband offended someone he couldn't afford to offend, and now he will pay the price for defying His Majesty, the Celestial Emperor. Despite her seemingly helpless situation, Xiaomei did not let fear control her and even smiled. I'm surprised it took you so long to come after me. The Supreme General coldly sneered as he slowly approached her. The Celestial Emperor's decision to dispatch the Supreme General to the city of Xian during a critical juncture of the heavenly war of immortals and gods risked their current advantage in the conflict. Yet, the Celestial Emperor deemed Xian to be threatening enough to take such a risk. This is also why the Celestial Emperor only ordered the Supreme General to assassinate Xiaomei, since he wouldn't be able to kill Xian without revealing his presence there to their enemies. I'm truly sorry, my darling, for being such a useless wife and mother. Xiaomei knew that fighting back or trying to escape would only be futile effort, so she used what little time she had left to think of Xian and recall all of the time they'd spent together. Meanwhile, when Xian sensed that the formation around his house had been destroyed in the midst of his fight with the Celestial Army, he, without any hesitation, abandoned the battlefield for the first time in his life as a soldier and rushed back to the city. Please let me make it back in time. He prayed inwardly until he returned home. When he arrived, he ignored the corpses that surrounded his house and immediately went inside the building. "Xiaomei, are you okay?" Xian shouted as he rushed to her room. However, his movements froze when he reached the entrance to her room. Standing outside the broken entrance, he could see the horrific scene inside the room. There was blood splattered everywhere, staining the walls, ceiling, and furniture. And in the center of this room was a lifeless body that had its limbs severed. However, the true horror lay in the grotesque sight of the Buddha's stomach, savagely cut open and ripped apart to reveal the small, helpless figure nestled within. Seeing this gruesome scene, Xian fell to his knees with a loud thud, his face filled with shock and despair. "Xiaomei, Xian released an inhuman cry that shook the entire city. Tears filled his eyes and flowed down his face like two streams during a rainstorm, quickly turning into blood a few moments later. Suddenly, Xian stopped moving and collapsed into the puddle of blood beneath him. However, he hadn't lost consciousness. In fact, he was wide awake and something mythical was happening inside his head. Memories of a life that he didn't recognize were flowing into his mind. Sometime later, Xian slowly pushed himself off the floor, muttering in a low voice, "Tianyang, Wang Shaoli, Shura." As clarity returned to his mind, Xian's fury surged like a tempest, his fists clenched so tightly that the bones within shattered under the force of his rage. Overwhelming killing intent and bloodlust emanated from him, so intense that it materialized into a thick crimson fog, shrouding the entire city in its ominous embrace, and his once brown eyes now glowed with a menacing red hue, as if they had been soaked in fresh blood. "Celestial Emperor, I will not rest until I slaughter everyone around you and bathe in your blood." Thus, the one who would soon terrorize the divine heaven as the evil god was born. C1430 Tianxian's Wrath. Chapter 1430 Tianxian's Wrath. 1430 Tianxian's Wrath. After experiencing the most traumatic event in his life, Tianxian recalled his previous life and regained all of Tianyang's memories. "Once again I was unable to protect my beloved," Tianxian muttered in a dazed voice as he left the building. When Tianxian walked outside, the crimson fog that shrouded the entire city like a blanket began thickening to the point where visibility was reduced to near zero, rendering it nearly impossible for anyone without divine sense to see beyond a few inches ahead. Furthermore, the bloodlust coming from Tianxian was so immense that it suffocated everyone in the city, knocking many citizens unconscious, especially the mortals. This sudden and ominous phenomenon terrified all of the citizens, as it looked like doomsday had arrived. Tianxian ignored the chaos within the city and turned to look in the direction where the Celestial Emperor's soldiers were still engaged in a fierce fight with his own army. He flew into the air and soared toward the battlefield the next instant, leaving behind a trail of bloodlust that scattered in every direction, quickly covering the sky and causing the world to darken. Meanwhile, on the ongoing battlefield, the Celestial Army was slowly pushing back Tianxian's army after his sudden disappearance. "Where's the city lord?" "I don't know," but he suddenly took off with a nervous look on his face, and I have never seen such anxiety from him before. "I'll look at the sky." "What's that?" One of the soldiers there pointed at the red sky when he noticed it. It didn't take long before nearly every soldier on the battlefield noticed the red sky, looking like someone had painted it with blood. That's killing intent. I have never seen such bloodlust before. I didn't know killing intent could materialize in such a manner. How much killing intent does it require to cause such a phenomenon? I would be more worried about the person exhibiting such bloodlust. The very next moment, a silhouette appeared in the distance. However, everyone was too distracted by the red sky to notice him. In the blink of an eye, this shadowy figure arrived at the battlefield and hurtled toward the battlefield without any pauses in alarming speed. Before anyone could react, the figure dove headlong into the ranks of the Celestial Army, shattering their formation in an instant. What the hell was that? Someone just invaded our formation. They must have a death wish. As Tianxian breached the rear lines of the Celestial Army, he found himself encircled by thousands of foes on all sides, with no allies in sight. However, this worked in Tianxian's favor, as this allowed him to go on a rampage without needing to worry about harming his allies by accident. After all, in Tianxian's enraged current state, discerning friends from foes was a luxury he couldn't afford. The moment Tianxian landed on the ground, he immediately started swinging his silver spear like a madman, killing everyone around him. Due to his immense killing intent that blocked the soldiers' views, they were forced to use divine sense to locate him. Moreover, the shocking amount of bloodlust caused even these seasoned warriors to freeze, hindering their movement and allowing Xian to kill them without any retaliation. The celestial army sent as a decoy became the first ones to experience Xian's wrath. As Xian killed everyone around him without discrimination, the soldiers' limbs and flesh flew all over the place, causing the sky to rain blood and human flesh. Ah! Where the fuck did this monster come from? It's Xian. The god of war is back. What? But why is he in our rear formation? His army is on the opposite side. I don't know what's going on, but we need to focus on him first. Once we kill Xian, the others will fall like flies without their commander. When the celestial army realized Xian had returned and even found himself amidst their ranks, they halted their advance toward the city of Xian and swarmed him like a colony of ants confronting a foreign intruder. Xian's army was left dumbfounded and puzzled when their enemy suddenly turned around and started running away. Wait. Where the hell do you think you are going? Hold on. I can sense a disturbance in the direction they are running to. This is the city lord's spiritual energy. He's finally returned. But why is he so far away from us? Who cares about the reason? We need to back him up. Thus, Xian's soldiers started chasing after the celestial army when they also realized that their commander was fighting the enemy by himself. However, when they could finally witness the scene of Xian slaughtering the celestial army like a mindless barbarian, the soldiers were left aghast, even terrified by his appearance. That's our city lord. He looks like a different person. What happened to him in the short amount of time that he left? Even I have never seen him like this before. Dong Yi said in a dazed voice as he watched Xian slaughter the enemy with a look of profound admiration on his face. Dong Yi has always admired Xian, but there was something different about the current Xian. Unlike the dignified and gentle nature he was familiar with, Xian currently gave off a barbaric, ruthless, and almost inhuman feeling similar to that of a wild beast. No, even wild beasts would not be so vicious. He's more like an evil being, one that was born out of pure malice, an evil god. Dong Yi muttered, feeling unfathomable reverence toward Xian's new appearance. Xian's soldiers were perplexed once they saw Xian's current appearance. They were unsure whether they should rush to his aid or hold back, considering his overwhelming aura of killing intent and the chaotic situation on the battlefield. Some hesitated, torn between their loyalty to Xian and their fear of the dark energy emanating from him. I have a feeling that we'll also be killed if we interrupt him right now. Does he even need our help? It looks like he can deal with their entire army by himself. Just what in heaven's name happened to the city lord during his absence? His eyes even turned red. Was he bewitched by some kind of evil technique? That would explain his behavior, sort of. C1431 Creation of the Shadow Army? Chapter 1431 Creation of the Shadow Army 1431 Creation of the Shadow Army. The more Xian's army watched him massacre the celestial army, the less they wanted to interfere. In the end, his soldiers could only stand in the distance like a group of stone statues and watch as piles of corpses quickly formed into mountains. An hour later, Xian lowered his spear after killing every single soldier from the celestial army. Some of the soldiers tried to escape toward the end of the battle when they realized that he was unkillable, but Xian chased after each and every single one with a profound movement technique that he never displayed before until today. As Xian stood in a sea of blood and beside mountains of corpses, he held a dazed look on his face. He stared at the red sky with his blood soaking every inch of his body, looking like he'd just jumped into a bath filled with blood. Despite the carnage he wrought upon the Celestial Emperor's soldiers, Xian found no satisfaction in his actions. His bloodlust remained unquenched, soaring skyward like a relentless tempest, leaving him feeling no better than before. His soldiers remained distant from him, fearing that he might attack them if they got too close. However, a fearless individual eventually approached him and kneeled before him in the sea of blood. "My lord, what are your commands?" Dong Yi asked. After a moment of silence, without looking away from the sky, Xian muttered in a low voice, "I am stepping down from the position of city lord as I have to leave for a long time. I don't know when I will be back if I ever will. Dong Yi, I will leave the military and the city in your hands. But my lord, don't follow me." Before Dong Yi could even finish his sentence, Xian flew toward the red sky and disappeared into it. Dong Yi was left speechless. He wanted to chase after Xian, but he didn't dare to defy Xian's order. In the end, Dong Yi could only relay Xian's words to the other soldiers. The city lord left his position and won't return? What will happen to the city of Xian now? What about our military? Where did the commander go? Why did he suddenly abandon everything? Although these soldiers were filled with questions, they eventually understood the situation when they returned to the city and saw the scene at Tian Xian's house, who left in a hurry and never got the chance to clean up the mess at his house. Dong Yi and the others were overwhelmed with sorrow and anger when they saw the gruesome scene inside Tian Xian's house. Most of them were familiar with Xiao Mei and treated her as though she was a goddess, so one could imagine the shock they received when they saw what had happened to her and her unborn child. Unable to leave Xiao Mei in such a state, Dong Yi and the others gave her a proper burial and even held a mass funeral for her. Many hoped Tian Xian would show up during the funeral, but alas, he was nowhere to be seen. After the funeral, Dong Yi and the rest of the army gathered to discuss their future. The commander is most likely fighting the Celestial Emperor and his army all by himself right now. He left everything behind because he didn't want us to be targeted as well. Damn it! How could we let such a thing happen to the city lord and fairy Xiao after everything they've done for us? We are so fucking useless. Isn't there anything we can do for the city lord? I refuse to sit still after what happened. After hearing the soldier's complaint, Dong Yi stepped forward and spoke in a grim voice. I have a suggestion, he continued. I am going to assist the Lord in his revenge. As powerful as our Lord may be, he cannot deal with the Celestial Emperor by himself. If you want to come with me, raise your hand. Otherwise you may leave, as this will likely result in our deaths. The very next moment, every soldier who had fought alongside Tian Xian raised their hands, their faces filled with determination. Someone then spoke, but how can we assist him? We're all too weak. And the commander had specifically told us not to follow him. Dong Yi closed his eyes and pondered for several minutes before responding. Indeed, we are too weak to do anything to the Celestial Emperor right now. However, things will not remain this way forever. Moreover, there are several ways to assist the Lord without letting him know. That sounds good. I'm all for it. Then starting today, we'll move in the shadows and assist the Lord from a place he cannot see. We shall become the Shadow Army. Yeah. Down with the Celestial Emperor and his lackeys. For the city lord. For Fairy Xiao. For their child. This moment marked the birth of the Shadow Army, evil god's most fearsome and mysterious army that would play a massive role in helping Tian Xian defeat the Celestial Emperor. Moreover, following Dong Yi and others' revelation of the dire circumstances to the rest of the city, the citizens rallied behind the cause, offering their unwavering support to the Shadow Army. The city of Xian, once the home of Tian Xian, now served as the bedrock for the establishment of the Shadow Army. Together, they forged a network to gather information and resources to support the fight against the Celestial Emperor, eventually becoming Divine Heaven's most formidable and largest information-gathering network. Since Tian Xian left the city of Xian and started hunting down the Celestial Army throughout the Divine Heaven, the Celestial Emperor stopped paying about them, allowing the city to grow without much hindrance. While many have tried to claim the city of Xian for themselves after news of Tian Xian's departure spread, the Shadow Army made sure to keep the place untouched for Tian Xian's return. Despite the absence of Tian Xian, the Shadow Army remained as a formidable force, composed of veterans and prodigies who had been meticulously trained by him. United by a newfound purpose and vision, they continued to grow stronger with each passing day, fueled by their unwavering determination and commitment to their cause. C1432 Heaven's Defiance. Chapter 1432 Heaven's Defiance. 1432 Heaven's Defiance. Watch out. Tian Xian, the evil god. One of the Celestial Army soldiers cried out loud in a terrified voice when he noticed Tian Xian's figure approaching their formation from a distance, carrying with him enough killing intent to scare even ghosts. Fuck. Would he have to show up now of all times? We were beginning to push back those Heaven's Defiance bastards. Another soldier cursed out loud. There's no way we can deal with the evil god and Heaven's Defiance at the same time. We're screwed. The forces opposing the Celestial Emperor in the heavenly war of immortals and gods adopted the name Heaven's Defiance as a symbolic gesture, implying their defiance against the Celestial Emperor who claimed to represent heaven itself. As for the title Evil God, nobody seemed to know the origin of such a name, but it quickly spread throughout the divine heavens, becoming widely recognized and associated with Tian Xian, who was once known as the god of war. When Tian Xian arrived at the battlefield, wielding a spear in one hand and a sword in the other, he immediately began slaughtering the Celestial Army like a madman. Oh shit. The evil god has appeared on our battlefield. We need to retreat before our own people get caught up in his bloodbath. Thank the Lord. If he hadn't shown up, we would have been in grave danger. Those from Heaven's Defiance, without hesitation, withdrew from the battle when they noticed Xian's presence on the battlefield. After all, Heaven's Defiance had already attempted to fight alongside Xian during their initial encounter. However, his relentless assault showed no regard for friend or foe, resulting in casualties among their own ranks. Despite suffering losses at Xian's hands, Heaven's Defiance refrained from seeking retribution and even tried to assist him on several other occasions. They recognized that targeting Xian would be counterproductive. After all, he was cutting down the Celestial Army at a rapid rate by himself and was their best hope of defeating the Celestial Emperor. While Xian chased after the scattering Celestial Army, Heaven's Defiance worked on stopping the Celestial Army from escaping. Ah! Where do you think you're going, Celestial Emperor's dogs? You think you can run away now? Look at you pathetic bastards. What happened to your arrogance from a minute ago? You have been shaking in your boots since the evil god showed up. Those from Heaven's Defiance laughed and mocked the Celestial Army soldiers for their cowardice as they prevented the Celestial Army's escape, allowing Xian to slaughter them at a much faster pace. Eventually, Xian erased the Celestial Army from existence. After taking care of the Celestial Army, he immediately left the scene to find the next battlefield with the Celestial Army's presence, completely ignoring those from Heaven's Defiance. As for Heaven's Defiance, they could only silently admire Xian as they watched him leave. In their eyes, Xian appeared out of thin air one day and started slaughtering everyone working for the Celestial Emperor or had worked for him at one point. It didn't matter if they were the active Celestial Army or some small family that once worked with the Celestial Emperor 100 years ago. He hunted everyone affiliated with the Celestial Emperor without exception. Fuck. That fucking son of a bitch, Xian, has been wreaking havoc throughout the divine heavens and slaughtering my people non-stop for the last 100 years. How is he still alive? Explain yourself, Supreme General. The Celestial Emperor roared with an enraged face, his gaze staring daggers at the Supreme General, who was soaked in cold sweat. The Supreme General, trembling in his boots, spoke in a nervous voice, "Your Majesty, I truly don't know what is happening. Xian was nowhere near this powerful when he was still a city lord at the city of Xian. His rapid growth and newfound power are far beyond what anyone could have anticipated. No matter what we throw at him, he somehow always manages to escape. Moreover, he never stays in one place. Even if we know he'll hunt down our allies, it's near impossible to predict his actions. Even though it's been 100 years since Xian left the city of Xian to hunt down the Celestial Emperor and his allies, he has long attained a level of cultivation that typically requires geniuses hundreds, if not thousands, of years to achieve even marginal progress, so the way he's growing like he was still a spirit lord did not make any sense. Xian's progress was simply unprecedented and unfathomable in the Supreme General's eyes. Bang! The Celestial Emperor suddenly smashed his jade table into tiny pieces and shouted, "I didn't ask for excuses, Supreme General. I asked why that fucking bastard is still alive. If you cannot do your job properly, I will have you replaced immediately." The Supreme General was horrified by the Celestial Emperor's words and the looming threat of being replaced, and he quickly kowtowed on the cold floor. This useless subordinate was wrong. Please give me another chance to dispose of Xian. This will be your first and last warning. Get out of my sight. The Celestial Emperor stomped his feet, causing the entire building to tremble. The Supreme General wasted no time and swiftly left the room, his mind consumed by the urgent task of hunting down Xian. In just a mere century, Xian had inflicted more damage upon their forces than Heaven's Defiance had managed to do in the past millennium, and he was working mostly alone. I refuse to let my tens of thousands of years of hard work vanish because of a single individual. The Supreme General no longer held back and started sending his elite soldiers to hunt down Xian. Unlike the ordinary soldiers of the Celestial Army that were at most golden immortals, these elite soldiers were all real immortals between the true immortal realm and God Ascension realm. C1433 Cat and Mouse. Chapter 1433 Cat and Mouse. 1433 Cat and Mouse. With 100 elite soldiers at his command, the Supreme General wasted no time, setting off immediately on his mission to hunt down Xian. Among these elite soldiers, 80 were at the true immortal realm, 15 at the first level God Ascension realm, and the remaining 5 at the second level God Ascension realm. At that time, the strongest cultivator was only at the 5th level God Ascension realm, so one can imagine the immense prowess of this elite army compared to the ordinary soldiers, who were at most golden immortal level. As for Xian, he was only a true immortal at this time, so it was overkill to send so many powerful experts after him, but the Supreme General couldn't care less and wanted to get rid of Xian without giving him any chance of survival. However, even though the Supreme General had such a powerful army at his command, they still had to find Xian first. Due to the immense size of their world, the Divine Heaven, it would take hundreds if not thousands of years to travel around the world even with the help of flying treasure, hence why Xian hadn't been caught after 100 years of carnage, as he would immediately leave after killing his enemies. Moreover, Xian was only a single individual, which made it even harder to track him down. The Supreme General could only show up to witness the aftermath of Xian's carnage, then attempt to predict his next destination and hope to close their gap. But with battles between the Celestial Emperor's supporters and Heaven's Defiance occurring in hundreds of locations around the world, it was easier said than done. Whenever Xian's sixth sense alerted him of imminent danger, he would immediately halt his killing spree and hide for several years to enter secluded cultivation, further increasing his strength and making it even more difficult for the Supreme General to catch him. This tricky cat-and-mouse game between Xian and the Supreme General would last for another 300 years until Xian broke through the true immortal realm and entered first-level God Ascension. Once Xian entered the God Ascension realm, he became much bolder and started attacking the Celestial Emperor's forces even more frequently. Who are you? Why are you attacking our Gu family? Do you have any idea who you're messing with? We have the Celestial Emperor's backing. Oh, have mercy. Please. Spare my children. A monster. You are not human, you monster. Xian ignored their screaming and slaughtered all of them without any mercy, regardless of their age or gender. Once Xian left the Gu family's household without leaving a single person alive, he lingered in the place for a moment to uproot the entire building, something he hadn't bothered doing before. Fuck. What the fuck are they doing? The Celestial Emperor blew a massive hole in his room after receiving news of the Gu family's destruction. For the past 300 years, he had endured the relentless onslaught of news reporting the annihilation of his allies by Xian, each report tearing away at the fabric of his power and influence. As for the Supreme General, he didn't dare to return to the Celestial Palace without Xian's head in his grasp, so he has been absent for 300 years, and his absence left a conspicuous void within the ranks of the Celestial Army. Meanwhile, when Heaven's Defiance learned of his absence, they immediately became more aggressive and daring, further complicating the already challenging situation for the Celestial Army. After another 200 years of no results, the Celestial Emperor called back the Supreme General. You are fucking fired, you useless piece of shit. I gave you 500 years to hunt down a single man, and what have you accomplished in 500 years? Absolutely nothing. The Celestial Emperor slapped the Supreme General so hard he fell on the ground. However, the Celestial Emperor didn't stop there and started kicking and stomping on the Supreme General while he was still down. Even though the Supreme General was an immortal, he didn't dare to retaliate against the Celestial Emperor and accepted the beating without uttering a single sound. This useless subordinate has failed your majesty, the Celestial Emperor. I don't deserve my position. The Supreme General immediately got on his knees after the Celestial Emperor stopped beating him. Scram. The Celestial Emperor shouted at him. Excuse me. The Supreme General immediately left. After leaving the Celestial Palace and going somewhere far away, the Supreme General unleashed all of his built-up anger on a random city, killing thousands of innocent mortals. Xian, this is all your fault. I swear to hunt you down until my last breath. After destroying an innocent city, Ru resumed his hunt for Xian alone, hoping to regain the Celestial Emperor's trust and his position as the Supreme General with Xian's head. 1,000 years later, Ru finally encountered Xian. However, it wasn't because Ru had successfully hunted down Xian. In fact, it was the other way around with Xian hunting down Ru. I have finally found you, evil god. Ru's entire being trembled from excitement after seeing Xian. Because of you, I was removed from my position as Supreme General. Because of you, the Celestial Emperor tossed me aside. You will regret ever challenging the Celestial Emperor today. Xian remained silent. Suddenly, as though a tempest of rage had been unleashed, a titanic wave of bloodlust surged forth from Xian's body, enveloping the heavens and the earth in its oppressive aura, spanning a vast expanse of 100 miles in every direction. And as if in response to his immense emotions, the very fabric of the heavens seemed to tremble, unleashing torrents of red and black lightning that crackled and danced ominously in the skies above. In a voice that seemed to chill the very air around him, Xian muttered with a tone that could freeze the blood in one's veins and even raise the dead, his eyes ablaze with a profound and unsettling glow, like smoldering embers in the darkness. I have been waiting for this day for over 1,000 years. C1434 Confronting the Supreme General. Chapter 1434 Confronting the Supreme General. 1434 Confronting the Supreme General. I have been waiting for this day for over 1,000 years. Xian could only control his anger for a few seconds after encountering Immortal, barely enough time to utter these words. After Xiaomai's death, Xian spent 200 years venting his anger on the Celestial Army and the Celestial Emperor's allies. Once his anger was slightly relieved, enough for him to think clearly, he spent another 100 years trying to find the culprit who killed Xiaomai. Unfortunately, he had slaughtered all of the soldiers Immortal had sent to distract him, so there was nobody left alive besides the Celestial Emperor who could identify Immortal as the killer. Yet, the Shadow Army, whose power and influence had been growing over the course of 3 centuries, somehow unearthed the truth, that the Supreme General Immortal bore responsibility for the death of Xiaomai. When Dong Yi learned of this information, he immediately sought out Xian to relay this information. Of course, since Xian was always on the move and sometimes hiding in seclusion, it took some time even for the Shadow Army to find him. In fact, if the Shadow Army had been even slightly less competent, they would have suffered the same fate as Immortal and the Celestial Army. One could even say that without Dong Yi, who had spent hundreds of years by Tianxia's side as his right-hand man, they would have never found Xian. When Dong Yi found Xian and revealed the information about Xiaomai's killer to him, Xian's somewhat subdued anger spewed out like a volcano during an eruption after decades of slumber. However, Xian was still too weak at that time to defeat Immortal, so he focused on training and improving his cultivation. He slaughtered the Celestial Emperor's allies as training and plundered their wealth, using it to further increase his own prowess. This went on for hundreds of years until Xian was confident that he could toy with Immortal. The first thing Xian did was seek out Dong Yi for the Shadow Army's assistance, helping him find Immortal. You took the words right out of my mouth, evil god. Do you have any idea how much I have suffered because of you? I was made a fool in front of those around me, and even the Celestial Emperor tossed me aside. How dare you make me suffer such humiliation? Immortal shouted like a crazy old man as he pointed at Xian with 2 fingers. Suffer? You call that bullshit suffering? Xian muttered in a cold voice, his gaze sharp enough to pierce even steel. He pointed his sword at Immortal and continued, for killing my wife, I shall teach you the true meaning of suffering. Ah, you mean that pregnant bitch. You should have heard the way she screamed when I sliced open her stomach and showed her the baby. I have never heard anything as thrilling. Immortal laughed like a madman. Hearing such words, Xian released a beastly roar that sounded like a dragon. His body began emitting a golden glow until it engulfed his entire body like flames. Immortal immediately stopped laughing, even choking on his own saliva after seeing the tremendous change in the atmosphere. Xian waved his black and red sword viciously, instantly splitting the heaven and earth before him in half. Seeing this, not even Immortal, who was at 3rd level God Ascension, dared to confront such a powerful attack head-on, so he quickly dodged it. Where the fuck is this bastard pulling out so much power from? Immortal cried inwardly when he sensed the violent and overwhelming spiritual energy contained within Xian's normal sword swing without any techniques. Xian was only at the 2nd level God Ascension, yet he displayed prowess that surpassed even the strongest cultivator in the world who was at 5th level God Ascension, the Celestial Emperor himself. Moreover, the golden aura that covered Xian's body made every single cell within Immortal scream in terror, almost as though they instinctively knew how dangerous it was. After unleashing his first strike, Xian immediately swung his sword again before even confirming that his first one had struck or missed Immortal, as if he already knew. Immortal hastily dodged the incoming attacks and started retaliating, throwing powerful martial techniques that could easily erase tens of thousands of miles of divine heaven if it landed. However, Xian used his black sword to effortlessly cut down any technique that was thrown in his direction. What? How is he cutting my immortal chi like it's ordinary spiritual energy? Immortal felt his world turning upside down after witnessing something incomprehensible. I refuse to believe you'll also cut down my celestial chi. Immortal shouted before exuding a divine and godly presence. When the animals, spiritual beasts, and even insects within a 100,000-mile radius sensed Mo Rust's celestial chi, they all instinctively lowered their bodies and bowed toward his direction. After attaining immortality, cultivators gain mastery over immortal chi, a force that can overpower any non-immortal. However, upon reaching the God Ascension realm, they ascend to a level where they can sense and wield celestial chi, a power that eclipses even immortal chi. Xian released a disdainful snort as he countered Mo Rust's celestial chi with his own. The clash between their energies resulted in a colossal crater spanning 20,000 miles around them. Naturally, everything within the crater had been completely erased from existence. The potency of celestial chi was such that even a true immortal would perish if struck by it. However, due to the immense energy required to wield celestial chi, it could only be utilized sparingly. After just using celestial chi once, Mo Ru was already soaked in sweat and panting heavily, something that typically never happens to those who reach the God Ascension realm. Yet Xian remained unfazed, his breathing calm and steady. Mo Rust's countenance darkened as he realized the vast disparity between their prowess, prompting him to contemplate possible avenues of escape from his dire predicament. Xian, who had been on the battlefield for most of his life, acquired the ability to tell when his enemy had given up and wanted to escape at a glance, so he could read Mo Ru like an open book at this moment. Ha 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 ha. Xian suddenly started laughing in an eerie manner, his voice sending chills down Mo Rust's entire being. We've barely just fought and you're already thinking about escaping? I understand why the Celestial Emperor sent someone like you to assassinate a helpless mother now. Turns out you're one cowardly son of a bitch. Mo Rust's face flushed red with anger after hearing Xian's insult, yet he didn't utter anything back, merely staring daggers at him. Xian suddenly stopped laughing and continued with a truly grim expression on his face. Let's see if you'll still dare to leave after seeing this. Dongyi, he shouted. Dong Yi appeared next to Xian the very next moment, but he was not alone, as he had a woman within his grasp, her presence clearly against her will. When Mo Ru saw the face of this woman being held captive by Dong Yi, his face twisted in shock and anger, almost as if he had eaten a group of live flies by accident. Chapter 1435 Unhinged 18+. Chapter 1435 Unhinged 18+. 1435 Unhinged 18+. Reader's discretion is advised. Mature content ahead. Understood? You can escape if you want, but you'll have to leave behind this helpless woman. Xian spoke in a nonchalant voice as he calmly gazed at Mo Ru, who was trembling so violently one might mistake it as an ongoing seizure. Evil God, you son of a bitch. I swear to God if you hurt even a single hair on her body, I will. Mo Ru roared at the top of his lungs, causing the entire world to shudder. However, he was quickly interrupted by Xian, who reached for the silky hair on the woman's head with his hand, grabbing a handful of it before viciously ripping it directly out of her scalp, tearing away a chunk of skin on her head and causing it to gush with blood. Ah! The beautiful woman in Dong Ye's grasp screamed in pain and squirmed like a fish out of water. Dong Mei. Mo Ru cried out loud as he subconsciously flew at her, but he was quickly stopped by Dong Yi, who casually pressed his sword on the woman's throat, threatening to cut it if Mo Ru got any closer. Seeing this, Mo Ru could only halt his movements and hover in the air with a helpless look on his face, not daring to move a single muscle in fear for the woman's life. Oh. Why is Dong Mei in their hands? She should be protected by. Mo Ru suddenly recalled that he had been removed from the position of Supreme General, so it was only natural for the Celestial Emperor to stop all support for him and his family. A moment later, Xian moved closer to Mo Dong Mei, who was shaking non-stop with tears constantly flowing down her face. Despite being a powerful golden immortal cultivator, she was akin to a mortal before Dong Yi, who was a true immortal. Please, let me go. I will do anything you want. She pleaded. Xian lifted his hand and gently caressed her soft cheeks, causing her to shake even more violently. Don't you dare touch her with your filthy hands, evil god. Mo Ru released an enraged shout, but he didn't move a muscle. Xian halted his movement and shifted his gaze from the terrified woman to Mo Ru. How long have you known each other? He suddenly asked. Why the hell are you asking such a question? Ah. Mo Dongmei started screaming again when Xian suddenly swung his sword, slicing off a piece of her face that had just caressed, creating a hole in her right cheek. Dongmei. Mo Ru clenched his fists to resist the urge to pounce on Xian, squeezing so hard it bled. How long have you known each other? Tian Xian calmly repeated the same words he just uttered without the slightest change to his expression, clearly unfazed by his actions. 180,000 years. We have known each other for 180,000 years. Mo could only respond to his question, fearing what refusing might do. 180,000 years, huh? I wonder how it would feel to lose someone you've loved for so long. I suffered unfathomable pain when I lost my wife, and we haven't known each other for even a small fraction of your time together, so I cannot imagine. Would you be kind enough to share your experience with me later, Supreme General? Tian Xian asked as he stared into Mo's eyes. Don't you dare, evil god. Please, I will do anything you want. Just spare her. Mo's will to fight had completely dissipated, leaving behind only a profound sense of despair and powerlessness, emotions he had never before experienced in such intensity. Yet Tian Xian remained unhinged, and as if to reflect his existence, the golden aura slowly turned black and red. You will do anything I want? Then I'd like you to bring my wife, Xiaomei, and our child back from the dead. Tian Xian requested. That's impossible. Not even the Celestial Emperor can bring back the dead. Mo exclaimed. In response to Mo's response, Tian Xian grabbed two of Dongmei's fingers and yanked them, tearing them right off her left hand, bones and all. You claimed you'd do anything, but you immediately proved to be a liar. Tian Xian sighed, shaking his head in a dejected manner. This unhinged son of a bitch. I'll definitely kill her at this rate. Mo gritted his teeth. Tian Xian suddenly narrowed his gaze and yanked 3 more fingers off Dongmei. What was that for? Mo exclaimed. I didn't like the way you were looking at me just now, he calmly responded. What? Mo was speechless. However, despite her seemingly fatal injuries, Dongmei was far from death's grasp, thanks to her high cultivation, which continuously regenerated her body. Tian Xian stopped paying attention to Mo and turned to look at Dongmei, who immediately looked down when she sensed his gaze on her. Hey woman, look at me. Tian Xian called out to her, but she continued staring at the ground. Seeing this, Tian Xian grabbed her by the chin and forced her to stare at his face. Then with his other hand he gouged her eyes right out of their sockets. Ah! My eyes! Dongmei shrieked like a ghost. Tian Xian ignored the screaming right beside his ear and looked at the 2 eyeballs in his bloodied grasp, muttering, If you're not going to use them, I might as well take them from you. Evil god. What do you want from us? Mo could no longer endure it and roared. If you're going to torture someone, torture me instead. I was the one who killed your wife. Not Dongmei. She has nothing to do with this. Tian Xian shifted his gaze back to Mo and surprisingly chuckled. Nothing to do with this. My wife, Xiaomei, also had nothing to do with my fight with the Celestial Emperor, yet you targeted her just because she was my wife. With a swift movement, Tian Xian clenched his grasp and destroyed the eyeballs, creating a weird sound. As for torturing you, don't worry, you'll definitely get your turn later. After saying such words, he returned to looking at Dongmei, who was still screaming hysterically, almost as if she'd gone insane. Chapter 1436 An Eye for an Eye, 18+. Chapter 1436 An Eye for an Eye, 18+. 1436 An Eye for an Eye, 18+. Reader's discretion is advised. Mature content ahead. Understood? Your husband killed my wife, so I will kill you in return. An eye for an eye. Do you blame me? Tian Xian suddenly asked Dongmei, who lost control over her body, causing it to release its impurities in the form of piss and poop. How dirty. You nearly dirted my clothes too. Dong Yi shook his head in an awfully calm manner despite what they were doing to this helpless woman. Evil god. Stop. I will help you fight the Celestial Emperor if you spare her. You can even kill me afterward if you want. Mo suddenly shouted. The Celestial Emperor? As if I need your help to get rid of him. Tian Xian sneered. Then what the fuck do you want from me? Mo cried out loud. I thought I'd already made it crystal clear at the very beginning, that I am going to let you experience true suffering. Tian Xian muttered in a grim voice. He then moved his arm, using his sword to perfectly skin Dongmei like one would skin an animal's hide. Seeing this, Mo could no longer endure it and pounced forth. If they were going to kill Dongmei regardless if he attacked them or not, he might as well take his chances. However, all it took for Tian Xian to stop Mo was a single blast of celestial qi. When he was struck by the celestial qi, Mo was sent hurtling into the crater, landing at the very bottom. Now let us continue. Tian Xian immediately returned to torturing Mo Dongmei. As Mo Ru lay at the bottom of the crater with a broken body, unable to lift even a finger, his cultivation allowed him to witness every moment of Tian Xian torturing his wife as if he were right in front of them. After skinning Mo Dongmei like an animal, Tian Xian proceeded to butcher her like a cow, removing chunk after chunk of her flesh until only her skeleton remained. However, surprisingly, Mo Dongmei remained alive despite missing most of her body and even her heart. Once a cultivator achieves golden immortal, they gain the ability to survive even if their entire body and heart are crushed as long as their soul remains unharmed. Mo Dongmei could have separated her soul from her body and escaped that way, but Dong Yi had sealed her soul within her body, making it impossible for her to escape. Sometime later, Tian Xian crushed Mo Dongmei's skeleton until it was fine powder and mixed it with her butchered flesh before forcefully feeding it to Mo Ru, who had been silently recovering his body as he watched everything. As for Mo Dongmei's soul, Tian Xian shattered it with his celestial qi right before Mo Ru, killing her without giving her a chance at reincarnation. Why, you monster? You are not human. You are the incarnation of evil itself. Mo Ru bawled his eyes out as he was forced to savor the flavor of his beloved wife, literally. Perhaps that may be true, but it was you who brought out the evil within me, Tian Xian said in a low voice. Sometime later, Go Ru shouted, "Well? What are you waiting for? Are you going to kill me now or what?" Tian Xian didn't respond and silently stared at him while surrounded by an ominous aura. After a moment of silence, he spoke in a chilling voice, "Do you seriously think it would be over so quickly?" What do you mean?" Mo Ru muttered in a dazed voice. What Tian Xian said the following moment left Mo Ru absolutely speechless and horrified. "In case you forgot, it wasn't just my wife who died at your hands. My child, our daughter was also slaughtered by you." Tian Xian reminded him of his crimes. "Why, you don't mean?" Mo Ru didn't even dare to completely decipher the meaning behind Tian Xian's ominous words, leaving his mind blank. "Dong Yi." Tian Xian called for him. "Yes, my liege." Dong Yi bowed to him before disappearing for a moment. After a few seconds of eerie silence, Dong Yi returned to Tian Xian's side with another individual within his grasp. This figure was much smaller than Mo Dongmei, and he was also much weaker, being only a divine warrior. "A father? Is that you? Please, help me. These bastards captured mother and everybody in our family." The young man immediately started shouting when he saw his father's face, even feeling relieved. "And no. Mo Ru had a look on his face so twisted and horrifying that it could scare even ghosts to death. "Please, evil, Tian Xian. Anything but this. Anything but my children." Mo Ru pleaded in a desperate voice. However, Tian Xian ignored Mo Ru and used his sword to cripple the young man's cultivation. He then turned to look at Dong Yi and spoke, "Bring the rest here." "As you command, my liege." Dong Yi left for a few moments again before returning with another individual. He repeated this until over a dozen individuals knelt before Tian Xian, their cultivations crippled. "Why? I only killed one of your children," Mo Ru asked with blood flowing down his eyes, nostrils and lips. "You didn't just kill one of my children. You killed my one and only child and my wife, so you killed all of my children, including the ones we would have had in the future." As Tian Xian spoke, he removed the limbs of his first victim, replicating the injuries Xiaomei had suffered. He repeated the same actions on the second victim, then the third, until he reached his seventh victim, who was a young woman with a somewhat round stomach. "This must be fate. You'll get to see your grandchild before they are even born." Without hesitation, Tian Xian split the woman's stomach in half, revealing the baby inside to Mo Ru, who could only lay there and stare at the gruesome scene with a blank expression on his face. Then, without stopping, Tian Xian continued to torture the rest of Mo Ru's children. Chilling screams that could freeze even hell itself filled the crater for many minutes until it suddenly became dead silent. After a long moment of silence, a blood-curdling and inhuman scream that sounded worse than a pig being slaughtered echoed throughout the crater. Tian Ziyan. Chapter 1437 Evil Gods Atrocities. Chapter 1437 Evil Gods Atrocities. 1437 Evil Gods Atrocities. After Tian Xian finished slaughtering Mo Ru's entire family before his very eyes, Tian Xian took a seat on top of the pile of corpses and calmly gazed at Mo Ru, who had an inhuman expression on his face. "To the heavens, they will not forgive you for your heinous crimes today." Ru cried as he stared back at Xian. If glares could kill people, Ru's stares had the potential to slay even gods. Perhaps, but I do not seek forgiveness for my actions today, I only ask for understanding. Xian muttered as he lifted his gaze to stare at the red sky that seemed to be growing darker with every moment. He then looked at his bloodied hands and sighed, even after all this, my anger is not fully satiated. Maybe it will never be satisfied, not even after I slay the Celestial Emperor. He returned to looking at Ru and continued, all you had to do was leave my wife alone, but alas, even if I had refused to do the Celestial Emperor's deed, he would have simply found somebody else to kill her. You should have never offended the Celestial Emperor. This is all your fault. Ru roared. Indeed, I am partially at fault for Xiaomai's death, but not because I offended the Celestial Emperor. Xian sighed with a self-loathing expression. I promised to protect her with my life, but I was too weak to even do that, so she perished. I have no excuses. He suddenly stood up and pointed his sword at Ru and continued, I don't care how long it'll take. I will find her again after her reincarnation. Even if she doesn't remember me, I will protect her properly this time. Reincarnation? You've truly gone insane. Ru sneered. Xian narrowed his eyes and muttered, don't worry, you won't even get the chance to experience reincarnation. His sword suddenly gushed with immense enhanced sword aura, decapitating Ru. However, since Ru was essentially a god, he would survive even if his entire body was crushed. Xian naturally knew of this, so he immediately captured Ru's soul and sealed it within the black sword in his grasp. Upon reaching God Ascension, a cultivator's soul undergoes a profound change, making it challenging for even another God Ascension cultivator to destroy it. I don't have the strength to shatter your soul right now, so I will keep you in here until I do. Xian tossed the black sword into his storage ring and silently stood there. Meanwhile, the sky above Xian had become so dark it looked as though it had been burned black. My liege. Dong Yi appeared beside him with a worried face. Go. Xian responded with a single word. Yes. Dong Yi immediately disappeared from the scene. Once he was alone, Xian glanced at the cruelty he had done and suddenly fell to his knees. Ugh. He proceeded to vomit violently, even crying rivers of tears as he emptied his stomach. His sweat-soaked body trembled non-stop, sending chills throughout his entire being. Ah! He released a beastly cry a few moments later. Xian, who had spent decades in resolve and had not felt anything during the process, was suddenly overwhelmed by an immense wave of guilt and disgust over what he had done to Ru's family. She definitely wouldn't have approved of my methods, even hate me for what I've done. He muttered in a low voice. Unfortunately, this is the only way for me to remain somewhat sane. The only reason for me to remain in his shitty world without you. Xian stood up a moment later and lifted his head to stare at the massive black clouds rumbling above him. What are you waiting for? Hurry up and get this over with. In response to Xian's words, the black clouds suddenly unleashed unfathomably powerful lightning strikes upon him. Hundreds of thick lightning strikes, each powerful enough to cause the world to tremble, smitten Xian's small figure, as if the heavens wanted to erase his existence. Yet these lightning strikes were unable to penetrate Xian's body, shielded by a black aura, let alone harm him. The heavenly tribulation lasted for several days without any pauses. Once the black clouds dissipated from the sky, Xian emerged from the burned crater without a single injury on his body. However, he was no longer alone, as tens of thousands of powerful immortals surrounded him in every direction. Evil God. You will pay for the atrocities you have committed today. Xian swept the crowd with a cold yet calm gaze. After identifying them as the Celestial Army, the suppressed bloodlust within Xian began oozing out once again. Even if I have to fight against the entire world, even if I have to split heaven and earth in half, I will destroy anything and anyone that dares to block my path to the Celestial Emperor. Xian continued his relentless campaign to slaughter the Celestial Emperor, leaving a trail of bloodshed and death across the divine heaven, with mountains of corpses marking his path. Brother Yuan, are you okay? Xiaohua's worried voice suddenly resounded. Yuan slowly opened his eyes and found himself kneeling on the ground with tears flowing down both sides of his face. Huh? What happened to me? He muttered in a dazed voice, unaware that Xian's memories had overwhelmed his consciousness. When he regained his clarity, Yuan recalled Xian's memories and the atrocities he had committed again, causing him to vomit violently. Brother Yuan. Xiaohua called out to him again. He hurriedly raised his hand and said, I'm fine. I just remembered something unpleasant, that's all. Once head calmed down, Yuan stood up and left the basement, returning to the house. Before he left, Yuan took the time to clean the entire building, removing all dust and dirt, fixing the broken door, and even cleansing the bloodstains in Xiaomai's room. Chapter 1438 Unique Quest? Chapter 1438 Unique Quest 1438 Unique Quest. After cleaning up the building to the best of his abilities, Yuan left the place and returned to the dark and ominous world outside. He turned to look at Invincible Heaven for a moment and said, "The city of Xian has been split into many pieces, but we can use it to determine our location within the Shadow Realm. The Invincible Heaven was built in the city's center, but it was pushed further east when we expanded the city, so we're near the eastern side of the Shadow Realm." Yuan closed his eyes and recalled the first city he encountered when he entered the Shadow Realm before. That part of the city was toward the western gate, so we'll have to travel west if we want to have a higher chance of encountering those two God Ascension Realm souls. Now that he had a sense of direction, Yuan no longer hesitated and started flying toward the west. As he reached the end of the city and neared the banished souls, Yuan heard a familiar noise and shifted his gaze to look at the notification. Yuan suddenly felt his body getting lighter, as if an invisible boulder had been lifted from his shoulders. Celestial shackles? What is that? Yuan raised an eyebrow at this notification, as had never seen anything like this before. However, it implied that he had been restricted by something, which had been unsealed when he fully regained the evil god's memories. With that said, while he's fully regained Tianxian's memories, he has yet to fully regain Tianyang's memories, even though Tianxian already did. As Yuan pondered about the implications of this unsealing, more notifications appeared. Quest. Difficulty: impossible. Quest description: complete the following trials to acquire the approval of Heaven's supremacy. 1. Defeat a cultivator who is at least 9 realms above you without using Heaven's supremacy. Defeat a magical beast that is at least 9 realms above you without using Heaven's supremacy. 3. Break your mortal shackles and become a true immortal. 4. Defeat 100 million enemies. 5. Attain an unbreakable will. Yuan's eyes widened with shock upon seeing the requirements for the trials. Even a top cultivation genius seen only once every 1,000 years would have trouble defeating an opponent who is an entire realm stronger, yet he had to defeat someone 9 entire realms stronger than himself. The second trial that required him to defeat a magical beast 9 realms above his own was even more difficult, as magical beasts are naturally stronger than human cultivators. As for the third and most time-consuming trial, he had to evolve his physique before he could even break through Spirit King, and even if his cultivation resumed its progress, it could take decades for him to reach true immortal. The fourth trial simply required him to defeat opponents, but the number needed was massive to say the least. The fifth and last trial was too vague to gauge its difficulty. Heavens, do I have to fulfill all of these ridiculous requirements before I can use Heaven's supremacy? He cried inwardly. While Heaven's supremacy was undeniably and incredibly powerful, even unrivaled, technique, the prerequisites to employ were simply staggering. How did I even manage to use Heaven's supremacy before I fulfilled these requirements, anyway? Did it deliberately give me a brief taste of its peerless prowess just to mess with me like this? He sighed. However, while these trials may seem outrageous at first glance, perhaps even impossible in the eyes of most if not everyone besides Yuan, he did not immediately give up and only found it difficult even with his advantages. After regaining the evil god's memories, Yuan's soul and demeanor underwent a profound transformation. Yet even with his vast and unfathomable experience, Yuan desperately clenched onto his own personality and character. Naturally, since had only lived for barely 2 decades in comparison to Tianxian, who had tens of thousands of years of experience, not to mention Tianyang and the other incarnations, Yuan's own experience was insignificant, akin to that of a single grain of sand in a vast desert. This made it incredibly difficult if not outright impossible for Yuan to remain unchanged, but he still managed to hold on to his core values and identity. As Yuan stood at the edge of the city, he silently gazed toward the direction of his destination with an ominous feeling in his guts. If I flew toward the western region directly, I would have to pass the central region, where some of the most dangerous and powerful banished souls exist. The Shadow Realm existed even before the evil god's birth, and Tianxian himself had traversed the world several times during his life. However, while there were not as many banished souls as in the current era, most of the expert souls resided near the center of the Shadow Realm, as it contained more spiritual energy, allowing them to preserve their souls and sanity a little better. Moreover, since there was only so much space in the central region, the weaker souls were forced to live elsewhere, where their souls deteriorated much quicker. In my current state, I'd be simply marching toward my grave if I approached the central region, so I need to circle around it. Since he was closer to the northern region than the southern region, Yuan eventually approached the northern region of the Shadow Realm. When Yuan entered the banished soul's territory, despite not exuding his soul strength, none of the souls there approached him, almost as though they were afraid of him. Yuan observed this change and wondered if it had anything to do with his strengthened soul, which was naturally exuding the aura of an ancient expert that could only be detected by the banished souls. However, he didn't complain and soared toward the next city with extreme speed. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Chapter 1439 A Familiar Notification. Chapter 1439 A Familiar Notification. 1439 A Familiar Notification. Somewhere in the primordial realm, a dignified middle-aged man of imposing presence sat poised upon the surface of a large pond while emanating an ancient aura, seemingly asleep. Suddenly, a ripple appeared on the tranquil surface of the pond, followed by a calm yet excited voice. "Father, the blood jade has finally activated." The middle-aged man's eyes, which had remained closed for countless years, abruptly snapped open, revealing his beautiful yet ominous red eyes. He stood up without creating another ripple on the pond and turned to look at the tall figure standing at the edge of the pond. "Prepare for his arrival," he spoke in a nonchalant tone. The tall figure, a beautiful woman with long black hair and similar crimson eyes, nodded before disappearing into thin air. Once he was alone again, the middle-aged man lifted his head to gaze at the dark sky and smiled. "At last, you have returned to us." A few more moments later, the middle-aged man also disappeared into thin air. Sometime later, several tens of thousands of miles away, a man wore a fearful expression on his face after he realized the middle-aged man had left the pond. "The Azura clan is on the move again." "What? The Azura clan? They've been silent for so many years now, though. Warn everybody. If we disturb them even slightly, there'll be another bloodbath within the primordial realm." Rumors of the Azura clan's sudden activity spread swiftly across the primordial realm, igniting speculation and intrigue like wildfire. Moreover, even though it was only a rumor, nobody questioned its legitimacy or dared to confirm it. The Azura clan? Fuck, why does it have to happen when the next selection is about to begin? What if they're planning on participating this year? Even if they want to participate, I doubt the heavens would allow them to. Whatever, it doesn't matter what they're trying to do. I'm going into seclusion until the selection begins. Regardless of their status or cultivation, most exiles within the primordial realm entered seclusion shortly after the rumors spread, turning the usually rowdy and chaotic place eerily quiet and peaceful. Meanwhile, in the Shadow Realm, Yuan silently pondered about Xian's memories, mostly his connection with the Azura clan, where Xiaohua claimed to originate from. His first encounter with the Azura clan was anything but friendly. In fact, they faced each other as adversaries since the Azura clan aligned with the Celestial Emperor's forces. Yet, this didn't imply an alliance, as many were coerced into supporting the Celestial Emperor under threat of resource restriction if not straight annihilation. The Azura clan was a powerful but small family that has existed since Tianyang's time but didn't start gaining influence until much later. Their family consisted of less than 100 members. Despite that, they were known as one of the most powerful backgrounds in the divine heaven, surpassing even the 9 immortal clans. Just like Xian, the Celestial Emperor coveted their talents and approached them. Unfortunately for the Azura clan, they were approached way before the heavenly war of immortals and gods even began, so they had to bear the full pressure of the Celestial Emperor's prowess. As powerful as the Azura clan may be, they could not defy the Celestial Emperor and his massive forces, so they ended up surrendering before joining his forces. While their encounter with the Celestial Emperor was unfortunate, the same could not be said about their encounter with Tian. Since they encountered Tian long after Head dealt with Mo Ru and regained his composure, they were not immediately annihilated without any chance of survival. Tian, after gaining enough strength and shattering Mo Ru's soul, started working together with Heaven's Defiance and recruited those who were forced to submit to the Celestial Emperor into their own forces. The Azura clan was one of these people Head released from the Celestial Emperor's shackles. Upon regaining their freedom, the Azura clan swore their loyalty to Tian and started their own campaign against the Celestial Emperor, slaughtering everyone who willingly worked with him. The pent-up bloodlust of the Azura clan amassed over thousands of years erupted like a volcanic explosion, shocking the entire divine heaven and leaving everyone terrified of their presence, their allies included. Xiaohua. What's the Azura clan planning? Why did they seal that little princess within Xiaohua? Yuan pondered inwardly. Since most of Tianxian's memories were related to fighting and hunting down the Celestial Emperor's forces, there wasn't much information on other matters. However, Yuan instinctively knew that he had to meet the Azura clan soon. I could either patiently collect the ancient seals and secretly enter the primordial realm or forcefully open it. Regardless of my decision, it will cause a commotion within the 9 heavens and alert the current Celestial Emperor of my presence. Due to Tianxian's memories, Yuan no longer had to rely on the ancient seals to enter the primordial realm. However, such methods would essentially announce his presence to the entire world. In the end, Yuan stopped worrying about something that might not happen for a while and focused on his current problem, Earth's calamity. After traveling for almost 2 weeks straight, Yuan finally arrived at his destination, returning to the city he had explored during his first visit to the Shadow Realm. The first thing he did when he entered the city was approach the giant dragon statue. Omicron M. As Yuan hovered before the dragon statue, he activated Dragon's Gaze to see if he could activate the statue again. However, there was no response. Sometime later, he scanned the city with Dragon's Gaze and sure enough, he could still see some buildings glowing, indicating that there was a Great One's trial there. After pondering for a moment, he flew toward the building that had the brightest glow and entered it. Inside the building was a small dragon statue. Shortly after he entered the building, a familiar notification appeared before Yuan. Chapter 1440 The Great One's Proposal. Chapter 1440 The Great One's Proposal 1440 The Great One's Proposal Yuan suddenly found himself standing in the middle of a long bridge while surrounded by golden clouds, and a familiar-looking entity with red skin and a bloodthirsty aura stood on the other side of the bridge. A demon, huh? In the presence of a demon, most would quiver with fear, but Yuan calmly gazed at it like it was akin to an ant in his eyes. This demon had the cultivation of spirit enlightenment, but in terms of prowess, it would rival even a divine warrior. Yuan shifted his head and gazed to look behind him at the red line drawn on the bridge. 059, 058, 057, a whole minute to prepare? How generous. Yuan mumbled as he took a seat right behind the red line. Once the timer reached 0, the demon started walking toward the red line in small and slow steps. Yet, Yuan didn't do anything and calmly watched as the demon slowly approached him. Seeing this, the demon bore a perplexed expression, baffled by Yuan's lack of resistance or opposition, almost as though he had no intention of stopping it. It took almost 90 seconds, but the demon finally stood before the red line. As the demon raised its leg to take the final step, Yuan calmly muttered, "Swords of eternal torment." The demon suddenly found itself unable to control even a single muscle within its body, much less finish the final step, almost as though its figure was completely frozen in time. 1:31, 10:31, 1 hour 59 minutes and 31 seconds, 2 hours passed in the blink of an eye, yet the demon remained frozen with its leg halfway in the air. 4 hours, 10 hours, 50 hours. Once the timer reached 72 hours, the demon suddenly shattered into countless fragments like glass, followed by a notification. Yuan already knew that he wouldn't receive any reward for completing the Great One's trial, but he still wanted to see if there would be any difference. It was a lot easier than I'd anticipated, Yuan muttered to himself as he left the scene. However, as he reached the exit, he sensed a profound gaze staring at him. He immediately turned around. "You are." Yuan was slightly surprised by the sudden appearance of an eye that hovered at the corner of the room. "You can see me?" The eye spoke in a slightly surprised tone. "You must be the Great One." Yuan quickly identified the identity of this golden eye. The Great One narrowed his eyes slightly and remained silent for a few moments. "It hasn't been that long since our last encounter, yet your progress has been monstrous for lack of a better term," the Great One remarked. The Great One had already recognized Yuan's potential from their first meeting, but he never could have imagined that he had underestimated Yuan's talent to such an extent. "Ha ha ha." The Great One suddenly started laughing. "Yuan, correct? Why did you challenge the trial even though you wouldn't receive anything?" "I just felt like it." Yuan casually shrugged. "Interesting. Then allow me to ask you another question. Why have you returned to the Shadow Realm? If you're seeking treasure, I'm afraid you won't find anything besides the ones within the treasure room. I'm not here for treasures. Yuan shook his head and did not further explain his situation. The Great One stared directly into Yuan's eyes, almost as though he wanted to read Yuan's memories like the last time. However, he quickly realized that he was unable to see anything and swiftly gave up. I have never met anyone half as talented as you. The Great One sighed. Thank you. After a moment of silence, the Great One spoke in a serious voice. It's been countless years since I last met someone with even half your potential. It would be a waste to ignore such talents, so I have a proposal. How about becoming my disciple? Excuse me? You want to accept me as your disciple? Yuan didn't dare to believe his ears. Indeed. If you become my disciple, I will help you reach the God Ascension realm within 1,000 years. Yuan raised his eyebrows and asked, what about your legacy? What about it? Would it still count if I met you in such a manner? Ah. The Great One started laughing again. The treasures I'll give to my own disciple will naturally be much better than the legacy's reward, something I created out of boredom. To tell you the truth, the legacy's rewards are mostly just random trash I've picked up throughout the years. Of course, even trash that I pick up is better than what the top families in the 9 heaven could provide. Yuan was left speechless by this revelation. The notion that the creation of the Great One's legacy stemmed from mere boredom caught him entirely off guard. You look disappointed. Is it due to the rewards or something else? The Great One inquired. A little bit of both, I guess. As ID said, even though the treasures for the legacy are worthless to me, they are still extremely valuable to others, especially humans. I can randomly pick a treasure from the pile and it would be valuable enough to start a war. Of course, you wouldn't have to worry about that if you became my disciple, as you'll have access to the most powerful techniques and valuable treasures in the 9 heavens. This is a once-in-lifetime offer. Even immortals and gods would not hesitate to become my servant, much less a disciple. The Great One became silent and patiently awaited Yuan's response. Chapter 1441 A little early? Chapter 1441 A little early 1441 A little early Yuan stared at the Great One's overbearing eyes and spoke after a moment of silence. You're actually serious about recruiting me as your disciple? Of course. I wouldn't joke about something like this. What makes you think I am joking? The Great One asked. I thought most beings of your stature typically avoided such things, especially since you're a divine beast. Since divine beasts and humans have different cultivation methods, it wouldn't make sense for a divine beast to teach a human in cultivation. Another reason would be their lack of human cultivation techniques and resources. However, the Great One was an entity that stood at the very top of the cultivation world with unimaginable wealth and resources, so such problems weren't an issue for him. If it were a few million years ago, I would have simply laughed at such an idea, but times have changed. Divine beasts and humans are no longer isolated in their own world, and the world itself is evolving in ways even I cannot fathom. In fact, you won't be my first disciple, or even second, but the third. Yuan smiled and said, it's a very enticing proposal, especially since it's coming from an entity such as the Great One. Unfortunately, I will have to decline. The Great One narrowed his eyes, his gaze seemingly filled with disappointment. What? He asked. This marked his first experience of being rejected in such a matter. He wasn't exaggerating when he claimed that even immortals and gods would be willing to become his disciples due to his unfathomable wealth and unshakable position within the 9 heavens. Honestly, there's no particular reason besides the fact that I don't like taking the easy route. While I may be able to progress much faster if I were to become your disciple, it doesn't necessarily mean I'll become stronger than if I were to take my own path. You think that by becoming my disciple you'll be taking the easy route? I didn't anticipate being underestimated in such a manner, and by a human at that. I am not underestimating you, but I'll definitely have an easier life if I ignore everything else in my life to become your disciple, as there are some things that could only be experienced and gained in the wild cultivation world. Of course, Yuan had other reasons for not becoming the Great One's disciple, but he didn't need to reveal such information. The Great One fell silent, his thoughts unknown. Sometime later he spoke. Since you have already refused, I have no reason to persist, nor would I go out of my way to beg someone to become my disciple. Good luck finding me in this vast universe. The Great One disappeared the following moment without uttering another word. Yuan didn't think too much of it and left the building. After preparing himself, Yuan left the city and made his way toward the direction of the treasure room. Sometime later, he halted his movements when he arrived at his destination. After looking around and taking a deep breath, he shouted in a loud voice that was amplified by his spiritual energy, "Immortal Fairy Yu Ning and Sect Master Ran, are you here? I Yuan have returned to fulfill my promise." Yuan's voice echoed for hundreds of miles in every direction. A few minutes passed without any responses, but he didn't panic and closed his eyes to wait while thousands of banished souls that had been alerted by his voice circled him like a school of fish without daring to get too close. A few more moments later, Yuan's eyes snapped open as he sensed a powerful presence approaching his location. Scram! A cold voice boomed, causing the banished souls around Yuan to scatter like startled pigeons. Yuan turned to look at the feminine shadowy figure before him and smiled, but before he could say anything, he sensed another powerful presence approaching them. Yuan waited for the second presence to arrive before speaking. "It's been a while. I hadn't anticipated you would return so soon," said Yu Ning, the immortal fairy, her voice filled with surprise. Ran then spoke, "While I am glad to see you again so soon, it appears to be a little too early for your return, Yuan. You're only a peak spirit king. I recall telling you to come back only after you've reached the cultivation of Spirit Emperor. You were too hasty to return." Yu Ning recalled with a slightly dispirited tone after realizing that he was only a spirit king. Yuan nodded, "I am well aware that I was only supposed to return after reaching Spirit Emperor, but rest assured, I have more than enough soul strength to get the both of you out of this gloomy place." "Really?" The two immortals exchanged glances with each other, seemingly in disbelief. "I wouldn't joke about something like this. I promise," he reassured them. "Now then, how does one go about housing souls in a soul weapon?" Ran then said, "First, we'll need a soul weapon that isn't already occupied by another soul or spirit. Then one of us will attempt to enter it. The soul weapon's master will be able to sense any intruders and reject them, but it'll be fine if you don't do anything and allow us to dwell within the soul weapon." "Will there be any side effects for my soul weapons?" Yuan asked. "No, there won't be any since we're only using it as a temporary home until we can recreate our physical bodies." Yuan nodded and retrieved the Starry Abyss, his first soul weapon, and asked, "Who wants to be first?" "Me." They both responded simultaneously. "Ran, I've been in the Shadow Realm for much longer than you, so it should only be natural for me to leave first. Also ladies first," Yu Ning said to him the very next moment. "That's bullshit." Ran immediately sneered. Seeing this, Yuan shook his head and said, "Relax, you two. Did you forget that I have two soul weapons?" Chapter 1442 Ran. Chapter 1442 Ran 1442 Ran, we know that you have two soul weapons, but to be completely honest with you, we're not confident that you have enough soul strength to house both of our souls at your current level, so you cannot blame us for wanting to go first. Ran said in a sighing voice. "He's right, Yuan. You also can't blame us for being skeptical of your capabilities." Yu Ning agreed with Ran and she continued, "If you don't have enough soul strength, it would be incredibly dangerous for us to occupy your soul weapon, so it's not as if we have no risk. Normally, we wouldn't trust the Spirit King to be capable enough to help even a single one of us, much less both of us at once, but we're just that desperate to get out of this hellhole." Yuan nodded, "I understand your hesitation, so allow me to get rid of them for you." "How will you do that?" "You'll see in just a second. It will hurt you a little, so prepare yourself." After taking a deep breath, Yuan exerted some of his soul strength, manifesting it in the form of a rippling energy that swept through their surroundings. When Yu Ning and Ran saw this ripple, they immediately felt a sense of danger and dread coming from it. Without hesitation, they sacrificed some of their precious soul strength to shield themselves from the ripple. However, even with protection, the ripple tore right through their defenses and inflicted a brief but intense pain upon their soul. The pain lasted for a split second, but it was enough to embed a deep sense of fear within Yu Ning and Ran. Yu Ning and Ran subconsciously distanced themselves away from Yuan. Although he lacked the strength to destroy their souls, he possessed the power to torture their souls with immense pain, something even more terrifying than death to these immortal cultivators. "That was only about 30% of my soul strength," Yuan spoke a moment later. "What do you think? Do you still doubt my capabilities to help the both of you?" Such powerful soul strength was only 30%. Impossible. Not even a spirit enlightenment cultivator would possess half of such prowess. Ran exclaimed, clearly in disbelief. Yuan smiled and replied, "If you don't believe me, I can do that again, but with 50% of my soul strength this time." Yu Ning and Ran trembled in fear when they imagined themselves experiencing pain even worse than what they just experienced a moment ago. There's no need to go that far. I believe you. Yu Ning quickly said. And me too. I apologize for doubting your capabilities. Jiran followed. After a moment of silence, Yuan spoke. I should have asked you this sooner, but what is your cultivation at? I was at 4th level God Ascension before my body was destroyed, but alas, after spending countless years in here, my cultivation dropped to Golden Immortal. Yu Ning sighed. I was also at 4th level God Ascension, but I've managed to keep my cultivation at 1st level God Ascension because of my unique cultivation technique, but that won't last for much longer. They'll probably drop to true Immortal in a few thousand years. Jiran shook his head in a dejected manner. Yuan's heart dropped a little when he learned of Yu Ning's cultivation since it was below God Ascension, but he quickly regained hope after hearing Jiran's words. How long does it typically take for one to recreate their body? Yuan then asked. It's not really a matter of time, but an issue of resources. Yu Ning said. In order for us to recreate our body, we need the proper materials. If you have the materials on you right now, we can reconstruct our body immediately. Unfortunately, these materials are quite valuable and rare. Yuan nodded. I understand. We can worry about finding these materials later. Before we begin, I have something I'd like to say, a request. He turned to look at Jiran and continued, You said that you'd give me anything I want if I took you out of this place, correct? Jiran swiftly nodded. Indeed. As long as it's within my power, I will help you acquire it. I only need one thing from you, your assistance. Can you explain? Of course. But before I do that, I have another question for you too. You guys have been trapped here before the heavenly war of immortals and gods even concluded, correct? That's right. Does that mean you aren't aware of the conclusion? No, we are aware. Some of the survivors had come here in the past after the war and told us everything, about how a hero known as the evil god showed up near the end and turned the tide against the celestial emperor, even slaying him in the end. Jiran said. He was widely recognized as the evil god, but he was also known as the god of war. If it hadn't been for his efforts, this place would have been even more crowded. Yu Ning chuckled. We're also aware that the place we once knew as Divine Heaven is now known as the Nine Heavens, she added. That's great. Then he'll start from the middle. Yuan proceeded to tell them about his homeland Earth and how they'd been split from the Nine Heavens after the incident that separated the world into 9 realms. He then explained the current Celestial Emperor's actions and Earth's calamity. I don't know why the Celestial Emperor brought us back to the 9 Heavens through Cultivation Online, but I will find out. However, before I can even do that, I must find a way to save my own world. Yuan continued to tell Jiran his plan, which required the soul of a God Ascension Realm cultivator. I think I get the gist of it. You just need me to supply this divine beast my spiritual energy so that it can restore the formation, preventing your world from destruction, correct? Jiran asked. Yes, that's right. Yuan nodded. As long as it doesn't require me to exhaust my soul strength, I will give you as much spiritual energy as you need. Jiran quickly agreed to help. Then you can enter this soul weapon first since I probably won't be able to use it while you are helping. Yuan extended the starry abyss, offering it to Jiran, who immediately flew toward it without hesitation. Chapter 1443 Yu Ning? Chapter 1443 Yu Ning 1443 Yu Ning. The moment Jiran entered the starry abyss, Yuan received a notification. Yuan suddenly felt the urge to retaliate and terminate Jiran's soul, but he quickly resisted such an urge and allowed Jiran to occupy the starry abyss. Once Jiran had successfully occupied the starry abyss, Yuan felt a chunk of his soul strength being consumed, absorbed by the starry abyss, but it wasn't enough to worry him. That took about 15% of my soul strength, huh? I anticipated worse. Yuan thought to himself. How do you feel? Jiran's voice resounded a moment later. I'm fine. What about you? I haven't felt this good since I lost my physical body. It's also much more spacious in here than I'd anticipated, almost like I have my own little world. Jiran responded enthusiastically, clearly pleased with his new temporary home. When Yu Ning heard how content Jiran sounded, she immediately became fidgety, almost as though she couldn't wait to relocate. Sorry, but I probably won't be able to help with the formation at my current cultivation. However, I can still try. I can also do other things. Anything at all. Yu Ning said, sounding a little worried and desperate. Yuan looked at her and smiled. Don't worry, I promise to get the both of you out of here, and I will fulfill my promise even if neither of you can help me. Of course, he would have had to delay their plans until he found someone who could save his world. Thank you. I will definitely repay this debt once I reconstruct my physical body, Yu Ning exclaimed. If she had a physical body, there would have been tears flowing down her face right now. Yuan retrieved his Empyrean overlord a moment later and extended it toward Yu Ning. Seeing this, Yu Ning immediately began flying toward the sword. However, right before she reached it, an unfathomable presence appeared, followed by a strong pressure that restricted both Yu Ning and Yuan's movements. What the hell is this? Yu Ning had to use all of her strength just to utter these few words. Yuan gritted his teeth and shifted his gaze to look at the shadowy figure approaching them from a distance. This shadowy figure arrived before them in less than a second, hovering between Yuan and Yu Ning. Who are you? Yuan asked this newcomer who had the figure of an adult human but without any facial features or distinct parts that would identify their identity. You can still speak while under my pressure? I knew you were no ordinary spirit king, but to think you were this exceptional. The shadowy figure spoke in a voice that resembled an old man. Why? You're the Holy Sword Saint Jin Jemming. What do you want from us? Yu Ning recognized the shadowy figure's identity from his voice alone. I don't need anything from you since I am here for this young man. Jin Jemming responded. He continued while staring at Yuan. I sensed your powerful soul strength and was intrigued, so I came here and observed you guys a little. So you were eavesdropping on us? How distasteful for someone of your stature, Holy Sword Saint. Jiran sneered from within the starry abyss. I stopped being the Holy Sword Saint when I was tossed into this place countless years ago. Jin Jemming retorted coldly. He then stared into Yuan's eyes and continued, You're looking for people to save your world, correct? Take me instead of this useless woman. I was at the 5th level God Ascension during my peak, and am still at the 3rd level God Ascension right now. If that's not enough, I will give you all of the Holy Sword Academy sword techniques. I will be much more useful to you in every way. Why, you bastard? Yu Ning shouted in anger, yet she couldn't refute Jin Jemming's words. As the sect leader of the Holy Sword Academy, an esteemed sect that once rivaled the Immortal Monastery in their primes during the Primordial Era, he held authority and resources far surpassing Yu Ning's. However, Yuan spoke with a cold grin on his face. Do you normally restrict the movements of the person you're asking for help? Hearing such words, Jin Jemming released his pressure on Yuan but kept it on Yu Ning, as he didn't want to give her the chance to run into the soul weapon. My apologies, it wasn't my intention. I don't usually panic, but even a god would lose some senses after spending so much time in this gloomy place. Yuan didn't immediately respond and pondered his next step. While he had no intention of helping Jin Jemming, he couldn't simply refuse to help him as Jin Jemming would definitely attack him, and he wasn't close to being strong enough to oppose someone at God Ascension even with evil god's memories. In fact, even if he worked together with Yu Ning and Jiran, they wouldn't be able to defeat Jin Jemming. Yuan? Yu Ning looked at him with a look of acceptance, almost as if she'd given up on leaving with him. You should take him. I'll stay here for now. If one of them leaves their soul weapon in the future and you don't mind returning for me, I will be eternally grateful. Yu Ning recognized the gravity of their circumstances. Jin Jemming wielded enough power to effortlessly annihilate them all, so she decided to stay behind. In doing so, she would, at the very least, still have a chance to leave the Shadow Realm in the future. Looks like I will owe you a favor now, Fairy Yu. Jin Jemming smiled. In response, Yu Ning merely snorted coldly. However, a moment later, to their surprise, Yuan shook his head and said, No, I won't let you stay behind. I said I'd take you out of this place, so I will. What? But, before Yu Ning could finish her sentence, Yuan continued, I didn't mention this before because it wasn't necessary, but I actually have 3 soul weapons in my possession. You what? The 3 immortals exclaimed in a shocked voice after learning of this information. Chapter 1444 Holy Sword Saint. Chapter 1444 Holy Sword Saint 1444 Holy Sword Saint. Why you possess 3 soul weapons? No, that's impossible. Jin Jemming quickly expressed his doubt. After all, even the most talented cultivators during the Primordial Era had 2 soul weapons at the most. 3 was simply unheard of, even unimaginable. Why would I lie to you? Especially when this sort of lie can easily be exposed. Yuan shook his head. Then what are you waiting for? Hurry up and show us your 3rd soul weapon. Jin Jemming urged impatiently. Yuan nodded and retrieved his 3rd soul weapon, the Dragon's Soul. The moment the dragon's soul made its appearance, its presence permeated the surroundings with a profound aura, causing the souls of the immortals to quiver in awe and fear. What a powerful soul weapon! They cried inwardly. Let me dwell within that soul weapon. Jin Jeming hastily said as he pointed at the dragon's soul. Yuan casually nodded, sure. Jin Jeming sensed something was amiss, almost as though had gotten what he wanted too easily. However, when he reconsidered Yuan's weak cultivation base and their circumstances, Jin Jeming no longer pondered too deeply about it and nodded. But will you be able to handle 3 immortal souls at once? Yu Ning suddenly inquired in a worried tone. Moreover, Jin Jeming's soul would be the most strenuous on Yuan's soul strength due to his higher cultivation base. Yuan looked at Yu Ning with a calm smile and said, I might be weakened a little, but of course it's no problem for me. Yuan retired the Empyrean Overlord, offered the dragon's soul to Jin Jeming and said, Here you go, senior. I'll let you go first if you're worried that I won't have enough soul strength to carry all 3 of you at once. Jin Jeming nodded and spoke as he flew into the dragon's soul, I will remember your act of kindness. Yuan felt about 20% of his soul strength being consumed. Yuan, you need to be careful of the Holy Sword Saint. He went astray during the war and became an evil cultivator who took advantage of the chaos to strengthen himself. Ji-Ran suddenly warned him through divine sense. Yuan didn't respond and merely held a mysterious smile on his face. A moment after Jin Jeming entered the dragon's soul, his satisfied voice resounded. This place is much more spacious and luxurious than I'd expected. Heavens! I can even feel my soul strength growing stronger just by staying in here. Ah, this place is fucking amazing. The more I explore the wait. Who the hell are you? Jin Jeming suddenly became alert, his voice filled with surprise. You little bastard. This soul weapon is already occupied by another soul. How dare you trick me? Whatever. I simply need to destroy this soul and become its sole occupant. A different voice suddenly resounded. Not only did this bug invade my sanctuary, but it even dared to threaten me? Ah! The voices suddenly stopped. Yu Ning and Ji-Ran swallowed nervously as they waited for the results. A few moments later, wait. Please, spare me. I will immediately leave this place. Jin Jeming's voice returned, but it was filled with shock and fear, sounding as though had encountered a ghost. Please, have mercy. I was wrong. I was wrong. Yu Ning and Ji-Ran listened to Jin Jeming beg the mysterious soul with wide eyes filled with disbelief. Mother. Father. Someone. Save him, I will remember this, Tian. Dragon Goddess Yu's voice suddenly resounded with a displeased tone. Yuan wore a bittersweet smile on his face as he responded, I wasn't sure you were actually in there and saw the opportunity to find out, so I took my chances. Sorry, Dragon Goddess Yeo. Now that I've confirmed you are dwelling within the dragon's soul, why have you been ignoring me? However, there were no responses from Dragon Goddess Yeo. The silent treatment again, huh? Yuan sighed as he wondered what he was doing wrong. Unfortunately, he probably won't figure it out until he recovers more of the immortal monarch, Tian's memories. Ding. Dragon Soul, Level 1, Rank, Soul Weapon, Growth Rate, Fast, Requirement. Unique Ability, Dragon's Roar lets out a resounding battle cry that shatters the surrounding spiritual energy. However, that was not the end. Ding. After devouring the soul of a God Ascension cultivator, the dragon's soul unsurprisingly leveled up twice in an instant. Unique Ability, Dragon Sanctuary creates a domain around the wielder that seals all spiritual energy from those that do not have dragon blood. Does not affect the wielder. This dragon's soul is... Yuan swallowed nervously after seeing its overpowered unique abilities. However, its unique ability only applied to spiritual energy, so it might be ineffective against immortals who could wield immortal chi and celestial chi. Still, it was a very powerful ability that could surprise even immortals. As for those who cannot use immortal chi and do not have dragon blood flowing through their veins, they were simply screwed. Yuan reclaimed the dragon's soul and retired the Empyrean Overlord again. He looked at Yu Ning, who was still frozen from shock, and said, It's your turn. Yet, Yu Ning didn't fly into the Empyrean Overlord and stood there like a stone statue, her gaze fixated on Yuan's calm smile. Seeing this, Yuan chuckled and said, Don't worry, this soul weapon is definitely unoccupied. Nothing will happen to you. Why, you promise? Yu Ning muttered in a timid voice. Of course. I only killed that guy because I knew of his character. He nodded. Jin Jeming was a renowned individual whose infamy reached even Tian Xian's ears, so he already knew of Jean Jemming's vicious character even before Ji Ran's warning. Chapter 1445 Replenishing the Lord's Cultivation. Chapter 1445 Replenishing the Lord's Cultivation. 1445 Replenishing the Lord's Cultivation. After receiving Yuan's reassurance that the Empyrean overlord was unoccupied, Yu Ning took a deep breath before entering the sword. Wow, they weren't exaggerating when they said it was spacious inside a soul weapon. You can probably fit 1 or 2 major cities in here and still have room to spare. Yu Ning's surprised voice resounded a moment later. I'm glad you like it. Yuan smiled. What are you going to do now? Ji Ran asked. Since I've accomplished what I came here to do, I will leave this place and return to the 9 heavens, he said. And because it's been a long time since you guys last seen the world outside of the Shadow Realm, I won't immediately ask you to start working, Ji Ran. However, I also cannot delay it for too long. Honestly, I don't care if I have to immediately start working. After all, I am satisfied just knowing that I am no longer in the Shadow Realm, Ji Ran quickly replied. Yuan nodded. Let me leave this place and show you my world first. However, Yuan did not directly leave the Shadow Realm. Instead, he returned to the nearest city where he logged off. Upon returning to Earth, Yuan immediately climbed to the peak of the Dragon Spiral Mountain to meet with the Lord. He met Leah halfway through the formation. I know you called in advance, but you couldn't have waited a few minutes for me? Leah complained with a slight frown on her face. Yuan smiled and said, I haven't cracked the formation yet, but I instinctively know the way to the peak after walking through this mist multiple times. Formations don't even work like that. Leah exclaimed with a look of disbelief on her face. Yuan shrugged and continued climbing the mountain. Sometime later, they arrived at the peak of the mountain, where the Lord was already prepared to meet them. I heard you had something urgent to tell me? The Lord asked. Yuan nodded and retrieved the Starry Abyss and Empyrean Overlord. Those are your soul weapons? Where are we? We were still at the Shadow Realm an instant ago. How did we end up here before I can even blink? Ji Ran and Yu Ning's bewildered voices suddenly resounded. In their eyes, they were in the Shadow Realm when their scenery suddenly flickered and changed to something completely new and unfamiliar. Calm down. This is Earth, my home world. Yuan explained the situation to them. Earth? Already? I was expecting it to take some time, at least much longer than this. Ji Ran muttered in a dazed voice. Sometime later Yuan said, Ji Ran, meet the Lord. Lord, this is Ji Ran and he'll be helping you with your cultivation base from now on. The Lord approached the Starry Abyss with a look of wonder on his face. I don't have a name, but you may call me Shui. The Lord said, and he continued, I also cannot sense your presence or cultivation from out here. Ji Ran then introduced himself. My name is Ji Ran, and I used to be the sect leader of the Immortal Monastery before my body was destroyed by the Celestial Emperor and tossed into the Shadow Realm, where I spent countless years. I was at the 4th level of God Ascension during my peak, but I was reduced to the 1st level of God Ascension after spending so long in the Shadow Realm. The sect leader of the Immortal Monastery? I never would have imagined that such a renowned figure would still be alive in this day and age. The Lord exclaimed, his voice filled with astonishment. Oh? You know of me? Ji Ran sounded pleasantly surprised as well, as he didn't expect to be recognized by someone who wasn't from the primordial era. Of course. You were a prominent figure in the primordial era, also known as the Devil Hand Madman after single-handedly annihilating the Maleficent Devil cult. And as the 2nd sect leader of the Immortal Monastery, you led the sect to its peak, becoming a top 5 sect within the Divine Heaven. Although the Lord sounded like a fanboy, one must consider his point of view. In the Lord's eyes, he was speaking to someone who should have perished long ago and only existed in stories. Even someone as ancient as the Lord came into existence long after the primordial realm ended. He was no different than a baby if compared to Ji Ran or Yu Ning. I think we'll get along just fine. Ji Ran sounded a little prideful as he spoke. Omicronim, are you sure you want to immediately start working? Yuan asked him a moment later. Ji Ran nodded inside the Starry Abyss. It's fine, I can start working now. It's not like I have to do it without any breaks, as I will need time to replenish my exhausted spiritual energy afterward. Anyway. Furthermore, although Shui is hiding it, he's actually in a lot of pain. His body is in a mess. I'm surprised he's managed to survive this long, much less support such a powerful formation for so long. Ji Ran spoke with deep admiration for the Lord's preservation and determination to protect Earth. Some time later, the Lord sat on the ground and closed his eyes, seemingly going to sleep. Meanwhile, Ran left the starry abyss and took the form of a middle-aged man before sitting behind the Lord. I will begin transferring my spiritual energy to you now. Ran warned as he placed his palms on the Lord's back and began transferring his spiritual energy. A refreshed and relieved look immediately appeared on the Lord's face, resembling an old man who regained years of energy after soaking in a hot spring. I can do this for 5 days before I run out of spiritual energy. Ran said a moment later. Yuan nodded. I will return before then. In the meantime, I'll show Yu Ning around this world. Not wanting to disturb them any longer, Yuan descended the mountain and returned to his living quarters. Chapter 1446 A New Era on Earth. Chapter 1446 A New Era on Earth. 1446 A New Era on Earth. Upon returning to his living quarters, Yuan encountered Mei Feng waiting at the front door. Are you waiting for someone? Yuan asked her. Yes, I was waiting for you since I noticed you had left. Mei Feng nodded. Did something happen? Yes, but it's nothing bad, for now. Yuan frowned slightly upon hearing this and said, Let's go inside first. Tell me everything. Once they were seated inside, Mei Feng spoke. The others are already aware of this, so you're the only one who is still out of the loop, unless Leah told you. He quickly shook his head. She didn't tell me anything. Mei Feng proceeded to show her palm to Yuan and continued to speak. Shortly after the system update, people noticed they could use the system even when they are logged out of. What? Yuan's eyes widened with shock after learning of this news. Watch this. The next moment, an item that resembled a storage pouch suddenly materialized out of thin air and appeared on Mei Feng's palm. We can bring certain items from to Earth now. This includes treasures, medicine, and most importantly, cultivation resources. The entire world's amid an evolution as we speak. Yuan sat there with a dazed expression on his face as he contemplated this new information. Sometime later, Yuan flipped his palm and retrieved a monster core that exuded the spiritual energy of a peak spirit grandmaster. It actually works. Then, without hesitation, he moved the monster core to his lips before swallowing it casually. Yuan could immediately feel his spiritual energy soaring, as well as his cultivation base. A few moments later, Yuan muttered, Character status. Ding. Cultivation, 9th level Spirit Grandmaster. Bloodline, Immortal Monarch Bloodline. Physique, Heaven Refining Physique, Golden Immortal Physique. So it's a simplified version, huh? He looked at Mei Feng and asked, What's going on with the world now that this is possible? Well, for starters, those who have the capability started consuming powerful cultivation resources left and right, causing their cultivation base to soar. I believe the strongest cultivator is a Spirit Lord at the moment, which is a massive increase compared to before the system update, where the strongest cultivator was only a Spirit Master, not including you and the others. Yuan nodded and asked, What about Meishio and the others? They've decided to wait for you before deciding on anything. Yuan showed a bittersweet smile and sighed, They shouldn't need to worry about me and do what they believe is right. And why didn't Leah tell me about this? She could have at least mentioned it before I left. Anyways, tell them to do whatever they want the next time you see them. They'll be leaving the Dragon Spiral Mountain for a bit. Where are you going? Mei Feng asked. It's been some time since I saw Yu, so I'm going to give her a visit. Omicronim, are you going alone? Yes, I'm going to fly straight there and back. Sometime later, Yuan asked, By the way, if we can bring things from the 9 heavens to Earth, can we also bring things from Earth to the 9 heavens? People have tried that but were unable to do so. Even the things that can be brought to Earth are limited, so we cannot bring anything we want. What's the limit? Treasures divine grade and above, as well as some of the more powerful cultivation resources. Hearing this, Yuan immediately tried to retrieve his divine grade treasures, and sure enough, he was unable to. I guess they don't want us to progress too fast over here, but it doesn't mean things won't change in the future. We should also start preparing for this change. Who knows what people will start doing with their newfound strength? This world is too small for any cultivator nonsense, especially as the average cultivation increases. Compared to the 9 heavens, Earth's size was akin to a grain of sand in a desert. If cultivators started going crazy with martial techniques and powerful treasures, Earth wouldn't last long and would be destroyed even before the Lord's formation collapsed. How are the Cultivators Association and the governments around the world dealing with this change? He then asked. Well, they're trying to do something. Regulations are becoming stricter, and they're thinking of restricting everyone's cultivation base to a certain level so that we won't be able to do too much damage even if we tried, but I'm not sure how they'll be able to regulate that. It seems impossible. Yuan rubbed his eyes and sighed. Looks like I have to speed things up and try to reconnect the 9 heavens and earth, but that will also have its own problem. I will speak with the Lord when I return. Let me see for myself what the world is like nowadays first. Mei Feng nodded and followed him outside. Stay safe, Yuan. It'll be a lot more dangerous out there now that everyone has access to powerful cultivation resources and treasures. You won't be as invincible as before. Mei Feng warned him. Yuan chuckled, we'll see about that. Sometime later, Yuan retrieved the Empyrean Overlord and jumped onto it before soaring into the sky, quickly disappearing from Dragon Spiral Mountain. Wow. Although the spiritual energy in this world is pathetic, it has a very beautiful scenery. Yu Ning exclaimed in excitement as they soared through several cities. Yuan showed a bittersweet smile and said, if we want to preserve these sceneries, we need to find a way to stop those with bad intentions from damaging them. Unfortunately, that is easier said than done. That is true. In fact, I can easily cover the entire world with my divine sense alone. This place is truly too small. If a fight between 2 spirit kings broke out, it'd be an environmental disaster. Yu Ning said. Unless they are insane, I doubt anyone would do anything too crazy, but then again there are plenty of insane individuals out there. Yuan sighed. With the rapid changes happening on Earth, Yuan started pondering methods to keep his friends and family safe even in this new era. Chapter 1447A Surprise Visit. Chapter 1447A Surprise Visit. 1447A Surprise Visit. After flying for almost an entire day without rest, Yuan arrived at the Eternal Lotuses headquarters. The guards at the front gate were startled when he suddenly descended from the sky and landed before them. Who are you? Yuan greeted the female guards with a handsome smile and said, hello, I am Yuan. I'm here to visit my little sister Yu. Yuan? The guards' eyes widened with surprise, but there was a hint of doubt in their eyes for some reason. Please give us a minute to notify Yu. Wait. Yuan suddenly stopped them. I actually came here unannounced to surprise her, so if you don't mind, can you let me inside without notifying her? You can let Lianhua know though. Sure, wait a second. How do we know you're actually Yuan and not someone disguised as Yuan? One of the guards suddenly said with a doubtful frown on her face. For all we know, you could have consumed an appearance-altering pill. After all, medicine and pills are part of the things that people are now able to acquire through the system, so things such as appearance-altering pills are becoming more common on Earth. Yuan didn't anticipate being questioned in such a manner, feeling like he was still in. I'm not sure how you want me to prove my identity. How about my Cultivators Association ID card? Those can be fake too. Yuan sighed. Aren't you being a little too paranoid? I'm just trying to visit my little sister. As if. Player Yuan is at the top when it comes to stolen identity right now. And Yu is also very popular with countless admirers. There are plenty of people who would disguise themselves as Yuan to get to her. In fact, it has happened before. Really? Yuan's eyes widened at this information, and he wondered when Yu became so popular. If you can't prove your identity, you may scram before we escalate this. Hearing this, Yuan shook his head and proceeded to take out his cell phone. He dialed a number before putting it on speaker. Hello, Yuan? Lianhua's voice resounded a moment later. Hey, sorry to bother you and this will sound sudden, but I am outside your headquarters right now. Really? I'll be right there. Thanks. Yuan closed the call and silently stared at the female guards, their eyes as wide as saucers. It was completely silent with neither of the guards uttering a single word until Lianhua showed up. Yuan. Lianhua rushed in front of him with a strong urge to embrace him, but she managed to control her emotions at the last second. You should have notified me earlier so that I could have called for Yu as well. Yuan shook his head and said, I actually wanted to surprise her, so I am glad you didn't. Come, I'll bring you to her. He nodded. Wait. The female guards suddenly stopped them. What is it? Lianhua asked, unaware of their circumstances. Meanwhile, Yuan spoke with a calm smile on his face. Don't worry about it. You were just being diligent. Keep up the good work. Did something happen? Lianhua looked at him with raised eyebrows. No, nothing at all. If you say so. However, Lianhua silently glared at the guards, almost as though she was trying to tell them that she would question them later. Once they entered the gates, Lianhua brought Yuan straight to Yu Rao's room. "Chem? She changed rooms?" Yuan asked as they walked in a different direction. "Yes. She was recently promoted, so she gets to live in her own room instead of sharing it. She's a hard worker. Looking at your progress, I can say the same to you." Yuan smiled. At a glance, Lianhua's cultivation was actually at first-level Spirit Lord. "This is mostly because of the treasures you left behind for my family," she said with a somewhat bashful smile. "Speaking of your family, is everything okay for you guys? Are the other families bullying you?" he asked. A bittersweet smile appeared on Lianhua's face as she suddenly stopped walking. She turned around to look at him and sighed. "Since we refused to partake in that event where they ambushed you, they've been blaming us for several things. It's nothing we can't handle, but the pressure on us has been increasing lately because of the system update. Everything is a mess nowadays." "How are they pressuring you if you don't mind me asking?" he inquired for more information. "They're mostly messing with our business and bullying our faction with challenges. We've been bumped down a few ranks because of that." "All right. A faction can challenge another faction to friendly matches to increase their rank. I forgot this system existed since we've never been challenged before. Who in their right mind would challenge your demon sealing faction? However, things might change soon with everyone increasing their cultivation much quicker. I'll keep that in mind." Lianhua then said, "Anyways, you don't need to worry about us. We can deal with some bullying and they'll eventually stop." Yuan nodded. "Don't hesitate to come to me if you need help." "Of course." They resumed walking shortly after and quickly arrived at Yu Rao's new room, which was located right in front of a small but beautiful fish pond. "Yu Rao, you have a guest." Lianhua knocked on her door. The door opened a moment later and a beautiful young lady in a somewhat messy appearance showed her face. "You've grown up, Yu Rao. Brother? What are you doing here?" "I've come here to visit you." "Why didn't you call me beforehand?" "I am not prepared to meet you. Give me a minute." Yu Rao suddenly went back inside her room and even slammed the door on them. Her actions left Yuan speechless. Several minutes later, Yu Rao returned with her hair neatly combed, a cute dress, and a subtle touch of makeup adorned her face. "Brother. What a surprise. When did you arrive?" Yu Rao greeted him with a bright smile, acting like their meeting a few minutes ago never even happened. "You've grown up, Yu Rao." Yuan repeated with a stiff smile on his face. Chapter 1448 The Plan to Protect Earth? Chapter 1448 The Plan to Protect Earth 1448 The Plan to Protect Earth. After successfully controlling her emotions for 2 seconds, Yu Rao stopped caring and jumped at Yuan with her arms wide open, embracing him tightly. "I've missed you, brother. You should visit me more often," she complained. "Sorry, I've been incredibly busy lately, but I'll try to visit you more often." "I don't believe you. You said you'd visit me soon every time we spoke on the phone, but this is your first time showing up." Yu Rao puffed her cheeks and complained. Yuan fell silent. "Brother Yuan? Let's talk inside. I have something important to tell you. Lianhua, you should join us," Yuan said with a serious expression on his face. Yu Rao swallowed nervously when she saw his expression. She quickly released him from her embrace and silently nodded before entering her room. "Just call me Lianhua," Lianhua said as she followed Yu Rao inside. Yuan entered last and closed the door behind him. Once they were all seated, Yuan took a deep breath and started explaining the situation to them. "As you probably already realized by now, isn't simply just a game. The 9 heavens truly exist somewhere in this universe, and our world, Earth, used to be part of the 9 heavens. However, after a certain incident, we were split from the 9 heavens and drifted away. When a world lacks spiritual energy, it will naturally collapse. Fortunately for us, we have an expert in this world who has the capabilities to support this world with his cultivation based through a powerful formation that surrounds Earth, and he has been doing so for millions of years. Unfortunately, due to which transfers our soul from Earth to the 9 heavens and back every time we log in or off, it has caused irreversible damage to the formation. If this formation is destroyed, the Earth will cease to exist as well." What? Wait a second, Yuan. This is too much information to digest. Are you telling me that our world is ending soon?" Lianhua exclaimed, her face filled with shock and fear. "I know it's a lot of information, and yes, the world is at risk of being destroyed. However, you don't need to worry, as I have managed to find a way to prevent it for now. That's why I have been so busy lately, Yu. Unbelievable, to think you've been trying to save the world. I cannot even begin to imagine the burden on you. I'm sorry for getting mad at you just now. Yu was on the verge of crying after learning the truth. So the world is safe from destruction now, correct? Lianhua asked for clarification. He nodded, yes, but only for now. It's just a temporary fix, and with the recent changes, I'm worried it might affect the formation even more. Moreover, our world is too small to have spirit lords, much less spirit kings that will appear sooner or later. The room fell silent. Lianhua then said, regarding the cultivation situation, the Cultivators Association and governments around the world have already begun working together to prevent cultivators from doing too much destruction. This information is only known to the top legacy families, but they plan on restricting everyone's cultivation inside cities to Spirit Master. And how do they plan on doing that? Yuan inquired. They have recently created a device that can forcefully restrict a cultivator's cultivation to a specific level, and they plan on using it soon. I don't know when they'll be in service, but the device should be undergoing rigorous testing as we speak. Yuan narrowed his eyes and began pondering after hearing this information. I just thought of a great idea. He muttered. What? Instead of waiting years for these devices, I can simply replace them with arrays and formations. Formations? You know how to create formations? Array masters are rare even in cultivation online. Lianhua said. I do, but I am nowhere near experienced or powerful enough to cover the entire Earth, so I will have to start studying arrays more seriously now. Even if you could achieve such a feat, do you really think it's a good idea to restrict everyone's cultivation base? Yu asked. Hearing this, Yuan sighed. I am aware of how oppressive and controlling it may sound, but this is for the best for everyone in our world. Forget about spirit kings, a fight between two spirit lords could already easily destroy a city. We didn't have this issue before because it was impossible to reach Spirit Lord with the resources available on Earth, but now that we can acquire and use cultivation resources directly from 9 heavens, it will only be a matter of time before we have an abundance of Spirit Lords and even Spirit King. Moreover, this isn't something new, as such a system already exists within the 9 heavens. Think about it. Spirit Kings are forbidden to exist within the lower heaven without special permission, and those who manage to reach Spirit King in the lower heaven are forced to ascend to the next realm, where it's large enough to accommodate their prowess. This sort of rule exists for a good reason. If we don't want Earth to be destroyed by insane people or by accident, we can only restrict everyone's cultivation so that it becomes impossible to do so. And in the future, when we reconnect Earth with 9 heavens, we can continue following their system, so anyone that wishes to increase their cultivation past the limit could continue doing so in the 9 heavens. That sounds like a good plan. Lianhua nodded. I can't believe we're making decisions that will affect the entire world in my room, and with just the 3 of us. Yu muttered in a dazed voice after coming to this realization. Yuan chuckled. The Cultivators Association and governments around the world have the same plan. We're just going to make it more reliable and protect every inch of the world. Now it's only a matter of who finishes first, their devices or my study. Chapter 1449 Possessing Yuan's Body? Chapter 1449 Possessing Yuan's Body 1449 Possessing Yuan's Body? Wait a second, Yuan. While we can restrict everyone's cultivation bases, what about their weapons? Are there formations that can prevent people from using treasures that are too powerful? Lianhua asked. Powerful treasures will require more spiritual energy to use. If we limit the cultivation base enough, it would automatically restrict their weapon usage as well. Then what should the cultivation limit be? Spirit Grandmaster? Spirit Master? Yu then asked. Yuan took a moment to ponder before responding. I believe limiting everyone to Spirit Grandmaster should be more than enough. If that's still too much or too little, we can always adjust the limit in the future. Now let's just hope that Earth will last until you can create these formations. Lianhua sighed. If you want, I can create the formation immediately. An unfamiliar voice to Yu and Lianhua suddenly resounded. Yuan turned to look at the Empyrean Overlord, which head laid against the wall, and asked, Are you an array master, Yu Ning? Yu Ning? Yu and Lianhua turned to look at his sword with raised eyebrows. She's a soul from the 9 heavens. Due to circumstances, she's currently occupying my sword. Yuan gave them a brief explanation. Yu Ning responded the next moment, Indeed, I am an array master. In fact, I am a level 7 array master. And you can create a formation that will cover the entire Earth? Lianhua asked. Of course. Your world is extremely small, even tiny after all. The 9 heavens have villages larger than your world. It won't take any effort for someone with my cultivation base to cover this entire world. However, since I am only a soul, it will be a little tricky as souls don't have the capability to create formations. Then how are you going to create the formation? Yuan asked. I will use a medium. So you're going to possess someone? It sounds bad when you put it that way, but yes, it'll require me to take control over another body. However, it cannot be just anyone since their body needs to be able to withstand my soul. Yuan pondered a moment before pointing at himself. Am I qualified to be your medium? You definitely qualify, but do you trust me enough to lend me your body? She asked. Well, what can you do once you take control of my body? Any side effects? A lot can be done, honestly. I can move it as though it's my body and even temporarily transfer some of my cultivation to you, but that's pretty much about it unless I forcefully destroy or consume your soul. If I consume your soul, it'll acquire your memories and secrets. If I destroy your soul, it'll permanently acquire your body. Though, you don't have to worry about me messing with your soul since I won't be able to do anything to you, who possess 3 soul weapons, each housing a powerful soul. If you still don't trust me, I can swear another heavenly oath. Oh, and there aren't any side effects as long as I don't spend too long in your body. It typically takes weeks if not months to see any side effects, and I will only be using your body for a few minutes. Yuan nodded his head and said, I understand. And there's no need for an oath. I trust that you won't try anything funny. You may be an immortal, but your soul isn't strong enough to do anything even if I let you. When do you want to create the formation? Yu Ning then asked, not questioning how a mortal's soul could be stronger than an immortal's soul. Can you make it so that certain areas or specific individuals in this world aren't affected by the formation? Yuan then asked. Of course. Great. Then let's create the formation now. As for the exceptions, you can decide who to exclude from the formation's power later. Since I will be using your body to create the formation, you will be its creator, meaning you will have full control over it. Yu Ning interrupted. All right. Yuan closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Whenever you are ready. Yu Ning took a moment to prepare herself before leaving the Empyrean Overlord and entering Yuan's body. A chill traversed Yuan's body when Yu Ning entered his body. Of course, Yuan could sense every movement and action made by Yu Ning while she was inside his body. Omicron, I will now try to take over your body. Please don't resist, as this will only make things difficult for both of us. Yu Ning's voice echoed inside his head. Okay. A few moments later, Yuan slowly opened his eyes, but it was not Yuan in control. Yu Ning had successfully taken over Yuan's body. She took a moment to inspect Yuan's body out of curiosity and was immediately overwhelmed with shock and fear by what she saw and felt from his body. Heavens! What kind of heaven-defying body is this, Yuan? Not even immortals have such a powerful physical body. Yu Ning became increasingly terrified as she realized how powerful Yuan was, and this was without taking into account his martial techniques. Once she was finished admiring Yuan's body, Yu Ning transferred some of her cultivation base to Yuan, causing his cultivation to skyrocket all the way to Spirit King. How weird. For some reason, I cannot increase my cultivation any higher than Spirit King. With my cultivation base, I should be able to help you reach Divine King easily. Yu Ning muttered in a dazed voice after experiencing this weird phenomenon. It has something to do with my physique. Are you unable to create the formation with my current cultivation? Yuan asked. No, this is enough to create the formation, but you'll need to reapply the formation every year if you want to keep it active. That's good enough for now. Then I will start making the formation now. Yu Ning started creating perfect array symbols with extreme speed, filling the room with tens of thousands of them in seconds. Chapter 1450 Godlike Body? Chapter 1450 Godlike Body 1450 Godlike Body? Wow, it's so beautiful. Yu Ro muttered in a dazed voice as she was quickly mesmerized by the golden array symbols filling up the room. Lianhua, on the other hand, was shocked at the speed at which Yu Ning was forming the array symbols. She had seen array masters at work several times but none of them were even a small fraction of Yu Ning's speed. Naturally, the array masters that Lianhua saw were at most level 1 or level 2 array masters. They were simply incomparable to a level 7 array master. In fact, it would be disrespectful to Yu Ning to do so. For the next 15 minutes, Yu Ning continuously created array symbols without stopping even for a split second, and Yuan's body was soaked in sweat by the end. Once finished, she combined all the symbols and shot them toward the sky. The symbols flew right through the ceiling and quickly disappeared behind the clouds. A few seconds later, the symbols exploded, quickly covering the entire world with a transparent veil that could only be sensed by level 6 and above array masters. Yu Ning immediately fell to her but afterward and gasped for air. "Brother. Yuan." Yu Rou and Bai Lianhua rushed to his side with worried expressions. However, Yu Ning was still in control and said, "He's fine. He's just a little weak after exhausting his spiritual energy. Yuan, I would return your control now, but it might be dangerous to do so while you're exhausted, so I will restore some of your spiritual energy first. If you don't mind." "I don't mind." Yu Ning nodded and corrected her position before absorbing the spiritual energy around them. A few seconds later. "Heavens! What is this cultivation speed?" When Yu Ning realized how much spiritual energy she was absorbing with almost zero effort, she was so shocked that she nearly lost control over Yuan's body. It's so easy cultivating in this body. It was so easy that Yu Ning wondered if she could sleep and cultivate simultaneously in Yuan's body. This is a godlike body that would make even gods jealous. Was he born with this body, or did he temper it to such a state? Yu Ning felt her borders widening after cultivating in Yuan's body, experiencing what it felt like to be a frog in a well again after countless years. If she were born with such a heaven-defying body, she would have easily achieved cultivation god with the same amount of time it took her to reach 4th level god ascension. With such an amazing body, even an immortal like Yu Ning couldn't help but have thoughts of coveting it. Unfortunately, she knew that any attempt to steal Yuan's body would be in vain, so she swiftly tossed away those unhealthy thoughts. I may not be able to have his body for myself, but as long as I follow him, it may be possible to taste it in the future. A few minutes later, Yu Ning completely replenished Yuan's depleted cultivation base even before she realized it. "I will leave your body now," Yu Ning said in a dejected voice, sounding heartbroken because she could no longer experience Yuan's godlike talents. After leaving Yuan's body, she immediately flew back into the Empyrean Overlord. She continued speaking the following moment, "Although I have created the formation, I have yet to activate it. You can do so whenever you feel like it. Thank you for your hard work." Yuan lifted his head to look at the ceiling and continued, "I will activate it when I return to the Dragon Spiral Mountain and speak with the Lord." "What should we do now?" Yu Rou asked. "I was going to walk around the city with you, but if you're busy, I won't bother you." "There's no way I would be busy when you're here," Yu Rou quickly said. Her schedule consisted mostly of training and cultivation, and she wasn't going to waste time doing any of that when her dear brother was visiting for the first time in a long time. "They'll let your teacher know that you won't be able to attend training." "Thank you. By the way, how long do you plan on staying here?" Yu Rou asked. "I was planning on staying for a day or two, but I can stay longer if you want. You still have a lot of things to do in cultivation online, right? As much as I want you to stay longer, I won't take up too much of your time, especially when you're trying to save Earth." Yu Rou turned to look at Bai Lianhua and continued, "Do you want to come with us, senior sister?" Yu Rou knew how much Bai Lianhua fancied Yuan, so she purposefully asked for her presence. However, Bai Lianhua refused her offer and said, "Thank you for asking, but I will have to decline. Maybe next time, since I don't dare to intrude on your family time. I also have a lot of work to do." "If you say so." Yu Rou nodded and didn't say anything else. Yuan left the building with Yu Rou shortly after. The two of them walked around the city and dined at many of the highest-rated restaurants in their city. "It's been so long since I've gotten the chance to relax like this." Yu Rou sighed as they exited their third restaurant. "Yes, it feels like thousands of years ago," Yuan muttered with a profound expression on his face. When he acquired Tianxian's memories, he essentially had to experience Tianxian's entire life again, and since it was done recently, it felt like thousands of years had passed for Yuan since he met Yu Rou, hence why he suddenly decided to visit her. Yu Rou noticed something was a little different about Yuan, but she couldn't pinpoint what exactly and just thought it was because of his burdens. "He's saving the world without most of the world knowing. He's probably putting on a brave face to not worry me. If only there were something I could do for him," she sighed inwardly. Chapter 1451 Simply Curious. Chapter 1451 Simply Curious 1451 Simply Curious. After spending nearly the entire day touring the city without any disturbance, their peace was finally broken when someone on the street recognized them. "Hey, look over there." Isn't that player Yuan? Someone there suddenly blurted out loud in the busy street. This single sentence caused nearly every head there to turn left and right until they also noticed Yuan. Holy shit. It's actually him. Are you sure that's really him? What if he's another imposter and only pretending to be player Yuan with an appearance-altering pill? That's what I thought at first, but look at that pretty lady beside him. That's Yu, his little sister. What if she's also an imposter? Who would be insane enough to put so much effort into pretending to be player Yuan? You have no idea. Due to the changes in the world, it became a common habit for many to doubt the identity of influential people, especially player Yuan, who was at the very top of the list of celebrities nowadays. In fact, it was a miracle that had managed to spend an entire day with Yu without being noticed. Are you really player Yuan? Please tell me you're not fake. Can I have your autograph, please? I am your #1 fan, player Yuan. Please shake my hand. Nearly everyone on that street rushed to meet Yuan, instantly encircling him and Yu. I should have worn my mask. Yuan sighed. This is why I rarely come outside nowadays. Yu shook her head. Her popularity and fame had reached heaven long ago just by being Yuan's little sister. While she has her own accomplishments and charms, they paled in comparison to being his little sister, blood-related or not. Yu grabbed my hand. Yuan's voice suddenly resounded in her head. She didn't question it and immediately grabbed his hand. The next moment, both of their figures began levitating off the ground and hovered above the surprised crowd. He's flying. He's definitely the real player Yuan. That doesn't prove anything. Anybody can reach Spirit Grandmaster nowadays with enough money? Fuck, how can someone be this distrustful? I wouldn't be surprised if you doubt your own identity. Yuan ignored the crowd and flew away with Yu, quickly disappearing from the rowdy scene. This reminds me of that one time when we sneaked outside to play at a nearby park, only for you to be recognized by someone. If we hadn't started running immediately, your fans would have surrounded us. In the end, we'd only managed to play less than 5 minutes at that park. Yu chuckled as she recalled some of her earlier memories. Yuan smiled and said, I also remember being scolded to hell and back for that little stunt. After a moment of silence, Yu muttered, Our parents? I wonder where they are now and what they have been doing since they disappeared from our lives. What about you, brother Yuan? Do you often find yourself wondering about them? Hearing her question, Yuan responded calmly and detachedly, To be completely honest, I haven't thought of them even for a split moment since our last meeting. However, now that you mention them, I guess I am a little curious about their whereabouts. But don't misunderstand. I'm simply being curious, not caring. Hearing no response, Yuan shifted his gaze to look at Yu, who had an air of melancholy around her, alongside a pondering expression on her face. If you're worried, I can try looking for them. I am not worried about them. They are terrible people who don't deserve to be cared about. Yu exclaimed with a look of denial on her face. Yuan smiled and said, It's okay if you do. I won't blame you or hate you for it. After all, they are still your parents by blood. However, Yu adamantly shook her head and said, I truly am not worried about them, brother Yuan. Just like you, I am simply curious about their situation. After a brief moment of silence, she continued, Though, perhaps deep within my soul, I still have some feelings for them, Yuan chuckled. It won't take too much effort to look for them. There is only so much space for them to hide in this tiny place after all. It's fine really. If we are fated to encounter each other again, we will definitely see them in the future. I will leave it to fate. Fate how? Yuan muttered in a low voice and didn't say anything else. The two of them remained quiet until they returned to the Eternal Lotuses headquarters a few minutes later. As they drew nearer to the headquarters, Yu noticed that it was a little rowdier than usual during this time of the day. There's so many people gathered at the front gate. Something must have happened. Yu pointed at the group of people standing outside the front gate with a worried frown on her face. Yuan stopped their movements and hovered in the sky to learn more about the situation before sticking their noses into it. At a glance, there were two distinct groups, with Lianhua leading one and a robust young man leading the other. They appeared to be in a heated conversation. Are you going to continue hiding in your headquarters forever, Eternal Lotuses? Our fiery Locust swarm challenged you to a ranking match. Since we are ranked lower than your faction and within 10 ranks, you must accept it, or Eternal Lotuses will automatically lose its current rank to us. The person in front of one of these groups shouted out loud. Lianhua sneered in response, If you want to talk about hiding, why don't you tell your master to get out of her hole and come face us personally instead of sending a bunch of goons to my front door? You're dirtying our beautiful home with your unwanted presence. Looks like the fiery queen is messing with us again. Yu sighed after understanding the situation. Fiery queen. Yuan mumbled as he held a pondering expression. Chapter 1452 Unlimited Money? Chapter 1452 Unlimited Money 1452 Unlimited Money. Since it's already late, we will leave for now and give you another night to think through it, by Lianhua. If you do not give us a response by tomorrow evening, we will put in an official request with the Cultivators Association. If you don't respond or show up to our challenge, your faction's rank will drop by another 10 ranks. How many ranks have your faction already dropped these past few months? 30? 40? Ah. The robust young man laughed out loud as he pointed at the Bai Lianhua and the others. Both choices will require us to participate in the ranking match, you shameless bastard. Yeah. Do you think you can start bullying us because you have the other family's support? If you want to fight, you've got it. Senior sister Bai, let's teach these bastards a lesson. Bai Lianhua merely shook her head in silence before turning around and walking back into their headquarters. Seeing this, the fiery locust swarm left shortly after. Once things calmed down and everyone returned to their residence, Yuan descended with Yu and went to find Bai Lianhua. Welcome back. Did you enjoy your day? Bai Lianhua said with a smile after seeing them, acting like the drama at their front gate had never even happened. Senior sister, we saw what happened at the front gates. Yu went straight to the point. Sorry you had to witness that, Yuan. Bai Lianhua sighed. Fiery Queen sent those people to challenge your faction? What? He asked. Just to provoke and mess with us, I suppose. Our families have been rivals for generations, even long before we attained our current position, so we've been butting heads with each other for as long as I can remember. However, they have never been this aggressive before. I guess what happened last time had triggered something in Fiery Queen. So I am partially responsible for this? Yuan muttered with a bittersweet smile. What? Of course not. But it is true that I flipped that trigger. And who told Fiery Queen to conspire against you with the other families? She's 100% responsible for her own actions, so don't you dare blame yourself for this, okay? I understand, but I have to ask, what are you going to do now? From what I've seen, it seems like you don't want to fight them, even if ITLL affect your ranking. What? Are you not confident in defeating them? Eternal Lotuses should be pretty high up in the rankings, right? I doubt you've achieved such a rank without proper qualifications. You're right, we've managed to reach the top 10 in the world. However, that was before the system update. Now that people can acquire cultivation resources from, we've been surpassed by many factions, as we do not have the resources to feed all of our members with treasures. Bai Lianhua sighed. And before you say anything, let me explain. While it's true that my family is quite resourceful, enough to increase all of our members' cultivation to remain in the top 10, I promised myself that I would not rely on my family's resources to assist my own faction. I created the faction because I wanted to achieve something with my own capabilities after all. Most of our funding comes from my own wallet, which I earned through my own effort, and while I can afford a few treasures here and then, it's not nearly enough to keep our faction in the top 10 any longer. Moreover, the Bai family has another faction which is being led by its patriarch, my father. Even he does not have the resources to fund two large factions at once. I didn't know you funded the faction alone. That's very impressive. Yuan said. Bai Lianhua shook her head and said, while that was true in the beginning and I still contribute about 75% of our overall funds, the others are also contributing to the faction by donating some of their own earnings from Cultivation Online. It's a group effort, so I cannot claim all of the credits alone. What about the Demon Sealing faction? How are you guys being funded? Yu suddenly asked. Well, Yuan had to ponder for a minute before responding. Honestly, I am not sure. Meishio used to handle all of the faction's affairs, but she was replaced by her mother, who handles everything now. The other members are fully capable of funding their own cultivation, and they've never approached me for funding. While I do assist them with treasures and techniques here and there, I don't think it would have made too much of a difference in their growth. With that said, we're not your ordinary faction, so we don't have the same routine as most. What about their cultivation techniques? Do you all cultivate the same techniques as we do? Bai Lianhua asked. No, we all have our own cultivation technique. Besides Meishio and Chu Liuxiang, I had nothing to do with how they acquired their techniques. Really? Even though you can acquire as many techniques as you want for free? Yu said with a doubtful look on her face. What do you mean by that? Bai Lianhua looked at Yu after hearing her words. Yuan answered with a smile, I have some connections with the owner of myriad of techniques, and I can pretty much take any technique from there without paying. You what? Bai Lianhua nearly fell off her chair after hearing this shocking information. And you can share these techniques with others? She then asked. Yes. Are there any limits? Not that I know of. I can even sell them if I want. That's ridiculous and totally unfair. You essentially have unlimited money. Bai Lianhua stood up in sheer shock. Yuan chuckled and asked, Not really. I don't want to break the economy by selling too many techniques. He continued after a slight pause, Do you want some techniques? I can donate some to your faction. Bai Lianhua's eyes widened with disbelief after hearing his offer. After a moment of silence she sighed, As much as I want to, I cannot accept your offer. That'd be no different from relying on my family's wealth. Yuan shook his head and said, You don't have to be so strict with yourself. You're just going to hinder yourself at this rate, not to mention your members. And you've already done more than enough and proven your own capabilities. Nobody would blame you for needing assistance now, nor is it shameful. Even if you say that. Bai Lianhua turned silent with a serious, pondering expression on her face. Chapter 1453 Faction War? Chapter 1453 Faction War 1453 Faction War. Although I don't want to admit it, he's right. Because of my stubbornness, our faction has been declining for the past several months, and our overall morale has dipped. The others say that everything is fine, but they're probably doubting my ability to continue leading Eternal Lotuses effectively. Bai Lianhua sighed inwardly as she pondered her own faults. I have already managed to bring my faction to the top 10 of the world through my own efforts. I wanted to reach first place, but there's only so much a single person to do, especially considering the current world circumstances. She turned to look at Yu, who sat there with a calm expression, and asked, What do you think of your brother's proposal, Yu? I think this isn't a decision for me to make, even if it's my brother's offer, she quickly replied. I know, I'm just asking for your input. What do you think about our faction's current standing? Yu nodded, her face serious, and said, Our faction is struggling, even though everything appears normal at a glance. My fellow sisters are feeling frustrated because we're being bullied without the ability to retaliate. The fact that nobody was able to bully us before makes that feeling much worse. I understand that senior sister has her own pride and ambitions, but please reconsider accepting my brother's help. I think we need it and it'll recover our fellow sister's morale. Even though Bai Lianhua was already aware of everything Yu had mentioned, it still felt bad to hear it coming from another person's mouth. Bai Lianhua sighed, You're right. I'm often told that I have a stubborn personality. Sorry if I've been such a useless leader. Please, senior sister, don't call yourself useless. You're anything but useless. She shook her head and said, A leader that cannot protect their own faction is useless in my eyes. Then she turned to look at Yuan and said, Okay, I will accept your generous donation, but I won't accept it for free. With that being said, I don't know how to repay you, so let's just put it on my tab for now if you don't mind. Yuan nodded while chuckling, Sure, I don't mind. And since I don't know what techniques would benefit you the most, he'll bring you to the myriad of techniques so that you can pick them for yourself. But aren't you in the fourth heaven, brother? Yu asked. Yeah, so? If you think we can't meet because of that, I can simply just go back down to the third heaven. Wouldn't that cost you a tremendous amount of resources? Most people who have ascended aren't able to descend, mostly for that reason, Bai Lianhua said. Yuan raised an eyebrow. Although he had never tried descending before, he always assumed it would be free for some reason. Now that I think about it, I probably thought it was free since I am the master of the stairway to heaven, but that might not be the case for others. I have never tried descending before. How much does it typically cost to descend? He asked a moment later. It all depends on how far you're traveling and your cultivation base, but it typically costs millions of spirit stones per realm. Bai Lianhua said. That is pretty expensive. Yuan mumbled after learning this number. Bai Lianhua sighed, It's fine, Yuan. I appreciate you trying to help, but it's not worth it if you have to spend so much money. Yuan smiled and said, Who said I need to pay to descend? However, even if I have to spend some resources, a few million spirit stones aren't an issue for me now. I still have a lot of trash to sell after all. Trash? Bai Lianhua and Yu raised their eyebrows. Knowing him, even divine-grade treasures might be considered trash in his eyes. Then when do you want to do this? Lianhua said a moment later. We can do it right now. Actually, I am currently in a weird location and it might take me a while to return. I will contact you when I am prepared to descend. Yuan sighed. He forgot that he was currently in the Shadow Realm, and even if he immediately left, he still needed to travel to the Stairway to Heaven, which would take a few days. It's okay, you can take your time. Even if the fiery Locust swarm challenges us to a fight tomorrow, it'll take some time to schedule it, usually 1 to 2 weeks. How are you going to deal with them? Yuan then asked. Well, deal with them how we dealt with the others, by facing them. We won't run away even if we are destined to lose. Yuan nodded and he continued to ask, I'm curious how these matches work since, I have never participated in one myself. Why do you sound so certain that you'll lose to them? Do they also have spirit lords? Official ranking matches are officially called faction war. Because these matches require a team effort, they are not something a single individual can dominate. The content of the matches varies as well. Some may be tournament style while others may be siege style where you defend or attack a point. They're basically settings that typically exist in video games. Where do these matches happen? Omicronim, they used to be quite simple where we pick our strongest members to fight against each other. Unfortunately, that got boring to watch really fast, so they started making it more elaborate and grander. All matches now take place on a large island called the Great Battlefield. This island has several sites built specifically for matches, and you can travel there by sea or flight. This is also why it takes so long for a match to be scheduled. Though, I must admit it's very entertaining to watch and gets a lot of viewership. Lianhua explained. That does sound fun. Maybe we should participate every now and then to change things up so we're not always cultivating. Yuan smiled. The Demon Sealing Faction? Lianhua swallowed nervously after hearing that they might start participating in ranking matches. Chapter 1454 Participating in a Faction War? Chapter 1454 Participating in a Faction War 1454 Participating in a Faction War, really? Are you really going to start participating in faction wars, Brother Yuan? Yu exclaimed excitedly. He nodded, yes, it seems fun. Lianhua wiped the invisible sweat on her forehead, her hand trembling slightly and said, it's going to get rowdy once the rest of the world learns of this. Countless people, myself included, have anticipated the day the famous demon sealing faction shows their prowess. Despite being worldwide famous, you guys have never participated in any events, and people are starting to question whether the demon sealing faction actually exists or is just a fake faction. Yuan chuckled at this information and said, faction rankings and whatnot are insignificant matters in our eyes, and we're always busy improving our own cultivation in both Earth and... Insignificant, huh? While that may be true for you who live in an entirely different world from the rest of us mortals, one's rankings determine whether they are respected, sponsored, or left in the dust. And having a sponsor is incredibly important, as many factions, including top-ranking factions, depend on them for survival and growth. Does Eternal Lotuses have any sponsors? Yuan asked. We used to have some, but I refused any monetary support from them so that they wouldn't impact our faction in the slightest, even if they were to disappear from our lives one day suddenly. My decision proved correct since all our sponsors stopped supporting us simultaneously last month. It would have greatly affected our operations if we'd relied on them, and I am willing to bet my savings that Fiery Queen had something to do with it. Lianhua shuddered at the thought of their faction being forced to close down due to a sudden lack of finances. I see. I am beginning to understand the economy of factions now. Honestly, I created my faction on a whim. I wanted a place for my friends and family, a place we can call home. I never once considered looking for sponsors or whatnot. Then how do the rankings work? Is it true that you must accept a challenge or you'll lose your rank? Yuan then asked. Lianhua nodded. Yes, but that is only true if the challengers are within 10 ranks of their target. This is to prevent those at the top from purposefully avoiding faction wars to prolong their rank. While we don't have to fight those who challenge us, we'll lose our rank to the challenger if we don't respond. Also, a faction can only be challenged once a month by those within 10 ranks. What rank is your faction at right now? Last I checked, we were at rank 77, a far cry from rank 9 just several months ago. I feel frustrated and ashamed every time I think about it, she sighed. Then what about my demon sealing faction? Yuan suddenly asked. The ranking system has changed drastically since it was first implemented, but the demon sealing faction should be unranked at this moment since you guys haven't participated in any faction wars. Is that so? Yuan closed his eyes and proceeded to ponder about some things. After a moment of silence, he opened his eyes to look at Lianhua and showed her an ominous smile. You don't want to deal with the fiery locust swarm, correct? How about we take care of them for you? You want to challenge the fiery locust swarm? The demon sealing faction only has 11 members, correct? Lianhua sked. 12 now. Yuan smiled. In order to manage the demon sealing faction's affairs, Meifeng also joined their faction. Lianhua looked at him in disbelief and said a moment later, I don't mean to look down on you or your faction, but you want to defeat the fiery locust swarm with 12 people. I told you that a faction war requires a team effort, right? Unless you're a spirit king or everyone in your faction is a spirit lord, you won't be able to overcome the difference in numbers. We're all spirit grandmasters, but we won't know until we try. Well, most faction wars are sieges nowadays where two factions attempt to overtake the other's base. Even you can't defend a base from thousands of people with 12, I think. That sounds like a challenge to me. Yuan smiled. He suddenly retrieved his cell phone and dialed a number. What are you doing? Lianhua had a bad feeling about his actions. An excited voice resounded from the phone the following moment. Hello, this is Chairman Li. Good evening, Chairman Li. Do you have a moment to talk right now? Of course. I always have time for you, Yuan. It's been a while since I've heard from you. I hope you've been doing well. I've been doing well. Thank you for asking. Anyways, the purpose for my call is this. After a brief pause, he continued, the demon sealing faction would like to participate in a faction war. Do you think you can help me arrange one? What? The demon sealing faction? Are you serious? Chairman Li's voice was filled with shock and excitement. Of course. Why would I joke about something like this? Chairman Li didn't immediately respond, but Yuan could hear some weird noises coming from the background. A moment later, Chairman Li responded in a calm voice. When would you like to participate in a faction war? Do you have an opponent in mind? If not, we can help you put out a notice to attract challengers. I do have an opponent in mind. They are called Fiery Locust Swarm. Ha! After a moment of silence, Chairman Li's dumbfounded voice resounded again. Did you just say Fiery Locust Swarm? But they are ranked 86th in the world with over 40,000 members, while the demon sealing faction only has 40,000 members, huh? I wasn't expecting such a large number, but their number is irrelevant to me. Or am I unable to challenge them due to the difference in our member count? Yuan asked. Regardless of your member count and rank, you are able to challenge anyone that isn't below your rank, but your faction will be at an immense disadvantage, and whether they accept the challenge or not is an entirely different matter. Chairman Li said. Chapter 1455 Fiery Locust Swarm. Chapter 1455 Fiery Locust Swarm 1455 Fiery Locust Swarm. Surely they're not going to give up the chance to defeat the famous demon sealing faction, right? After all, we're only 12 people. Yuan chuckled through the phone, leaving Chairman Li utterly speechless. Are you seriously going to challenge the Fiery Locust Swarm to a faction war? You might have to go against hundreds if not thousands of them with just 12 of you. Chairman Li asked, his voice filled with disbelief. Yes, I am serious, Yuan replied, his voice filled with determination. A moment of silence later, Chairman Li sighed. Very well, I will send your challenge request to the Fiery Locust Swarm, but before I can do that, I need to know the details of the challenge. As the challenger, you may set your terms for the match, such as limiting the amount of participants and the suggested challenge mode. Since this is my first time participating in a faction war, much less challenging another faction, can you run me through it? Of course. First things first, what mode do you want to fight them in? We have Siege mode, Tower Defense mode, War mode, Capture the Flag mode, Scavenger mode, and Tournament mode. Since you only have 12 members, I suggest doing Tournament or Scavenger mode, but most factions tend to avoid these two modes because they won't be able to take advantage of their member counts. The Fiery Locust Swarm will definitely reject your challenge if you request either of these modes. I thought we couldn't select our match conditions? Yuan asked. That's only true if you're within 10 ranks of your opponent and you're aiming for their rank. Since the demon sealing faction is currently unranked, the Fiery Locust Swarm can refuse your challenge without any consequences, so the rules are much more relaxed. Of course, they can still lose their rank if they are defeated. I see. Can you give me a brief explanation of the available modes? Chairman Li nodded and explained, in siege mode each faction will possess a castle, and the objective is to conquer the opposing castle and kill their ruler for victory. The ruler cannot join any battles or fight back, only run. There is no player limit for this mode, but there must be at least 1,000 total players on the field. In tower defense mode each faction controls 5 towers. The first one to control all 5 towers or the most towers before time runs out will win. There is no player limit for this mode, but there must be at least 100 total players on the field. In war mode, it mirrors a conflict with equitable conditions, with both factions engaging in battle on a field with evenly matched soldiers of comparable cultivation levels. The first faction to lose all soldiers will lose. However, you won't be able to participate in this unless you can match your opponent's soldiers' prowess and number and vice versa. You need at least 100 players from each faction to participate, but there is no player limit. Capture the flag is similar to siege mode, but you must steal the enemy's flag and bring it back to your base before they can do the same to your flag. Each faction is limited to 300 players in this mode. In scavenger mode, both factions will scavenge items scattered across a spacious field and bring them back to base, with each retrieved item granting points. As long as the item hasn't been retrieved, the opponent can steal it. The one with the highest point in the end wins. Each faction is limited to 30 players in this mode. Last but not least, tournament mode. In this mode, both factions will select their strongest members to fight against each other on a traditional stage. The fights will be one-on-one, and the winner of the match may continue fighting in the second match until they lose. The first one to defeat all of their opponent's fighters will win. Each faction is limited to 10 players. For all of these modes except tournament mode, each participant will wear a badge that represents their life. If one's badge is destroyed, they are considered dead, can no longer participate in the match, and will be removed from the battlefield. This keeps the participants from purposefully aiming at each other's necks, keeping them safe. Also, the weapons provided cannot slice flesh but can break bones. I'm impressed. This is pretty well thought out. It sounded dangerous at first, but it turned out to be quite safe. Yuan said. Of course. Faction war is akin to sports nowadays after all. While we have had some casualties, some accidents cannot be avoided when everyone is a cultivator. Alright, give me a moment to think now, Yuan said. A few minutes later he spoke, let's do Siggy mode. What about the number of players? You need at least 1,000 total players to participate, so with 12 members on your side, your enemy needs to have at least 988 players. Yuan smiled and said, no limit. They can bring all 40,000 of their members if they want. What? But that's... Chairman Li was left speechless by Yuan's arrogance. Even by Lianhua and Yu couldn't help but stare at him with wide eyes, as if they were looking at a madman. I'm serious. I want them to attack us with full force. If that's truly what you want, it is, Yuan confirmed. I understand. Any cultivation limit? No. What about martial techniques? Do you want to allow the usage of martial techniques? Omicronym, of course. When would you like to challenge them? Right now, and give them until tomorrow midnight to respond. If they accept, can you schedule the match to start within a few days? A few days? That's quite the rush, but it's possible if we push all scheduled matches back a day. It will probably upset the other factions though, actually, probably not. I'm sure they'll understand. This is the famous Demon Sealing faction's debut after all. Alright, I have all the information I need. I will notify the fiery Locust swarm of your challenge right away. Thank you, Chairman Li. To show my gratitude, he'll donate some techniques to the Cultivators Association later, said Yuan. Chapter 1456 Demon Sealing Factions Challenge Request? Chapter 1456 Demon Sealing Factions Challenge Request 1456 Demon Sealing Factions Challenge Request. When Chairman Li heard Yuan planned on donating some techniques to the Cultivators Association, he immediately jumped up and down in excitement. After all, anything that came from player Yuan was definitely very precious and significant. Also, if you don't mind, can you spread the news about the Demon Sealing faction challenging the fiery Locust swarm? If everyone is aware of it, it might be harder for them to reject our challenge, Yuan suddenly suggested. Of course we can arrange that for you. Then I will call you back once I have a response from the fiery Locust swarm. Thank you. Yuan closed the call and turned to look at Lianhua, who had been staring at him with wide eyes and a loose jaw throughout the entire call. Seeing her reaction, he simply smiled in silence. "Do you really plan on fighting 40,000 people with 12? Yu suddenly asked with a worried look on her face. Yuan shook his head, but before they could say anything else he spoke. "No, we don't plan on making everyone participate. Mei Feng, for example. I don't want to make her fight, so we'll have 11 people at most." "Unbelievable." Bai Lianhua muttered in a dazed voice. "Nobody will think you have a chance of winning this faction war, you know? That's fine. I don't expect anyone to, anyway." Then he dialed another number on his phone and raised it to his ear again. "Hello, Miss Mei Feng? This is going to be very sudden and out of the blue, but I just challenged another faction to a faction war. If they agree, we'll begin in a few days." "Huh? Faction war? With whom?" Mei Feng didn't bother asking him why. "Fiery Locust Swarm." Yuan did not expect Mei Feng to know about them, but to his surprise she started mumbling about their statistics as though she was their manager. Fiery Locust Swarm is ranked 86th in the world. It had 39,500 members last month. It has approximately 30,000 spirit apprentices, 9,000 spirit warriors, 300 spirit masters, 7 spirit grandmasters and 1 first-level spirit lord. "How do you have so much information on them?" Yuan couldn't help but ask. "As the manager of the Demon Sealing faction, it is my duty to know everything about our potential competitors. I have information on every faction that wasn't recently founded. I appreciate the effort, but there's really no point wasting your effort on this, Miss Mei Feng. It hardly requires any effort on my part, so I don't mind it. If you say so. Anyways, can you let the others know about it whenever you see them? They are not required to participate either." "Okay, I will let them know. What about the nature of the faction war?" Mei Feng then asked. "Siege mode." "I understand. Then I will give you a call when I have a response from the Fiery Locust Swarm." "Yes, young master." After Yuan hung up the phone, Bai Lianhua said to him, "Yuan, do you know why it's incredibly difficult, if not impossible, to win a faction war alone even if you have a superior cultivation? It's because you need to hold back your strength so that you don't accidentally cripple or kill your opponents, especially when you're surrounded by enemies in a heated battle. In order to prevent players from killing each other, real weapons are strictly forbidden, and one's life is represented by a badge around their waist. In a fight, you cannot attack your opponent with the intention to kill or purposefully cripple them. However, with martial techniques allowed, it is still possible to accidentally cripple or kill someone with our bare hands. When that happens, you will automatically be disqualified and removed from the faction war. During my first faction war after the system update, I tried a little too hard and nearly killed a spirit apprentice, which got me disqualified and removed, costing us the match. Since then, I instinctively hold back and haven't used even half of my strength." Bai Lianhua sighed. "I see, that does make sense." After a moment of silence, Yuan suddenly suggested, "Hey, would you mind letting me spar with your members?" You want to spar with my members?" Bai Lianhua's eyes widened with shock. "No way. Are you trying to bully my fellow sister's brother Yuan?" Yu spoke up in a somewhat joking tone. Yuan chuckled and elaborated, "Of course not. I want to practice holding back my strength, and this will be good training for them since I will also be giving them combat advice." "Training with you, huh? That might not be a bad idea. I won't mind it as long as you can guarantee that none of my members will be harmed too badly," Bai Lianhua said. "Don't worry. It's not like I don't know how to control my strength at all, and I don't intend on actually hitting them." "Huh. Then what's the point of sparring? We will treat it like it's a faction war and try to destroy the other's badge." "Oh, I see what you are trying to do now. Okay, I approve of it. I will let the others know so you can start tomorrow," Bai Lianhua said. "Okay." Yuan nodded. Meanwhile, shortly after Chairman Li sent the Demon Sealing Faction's challenge request to Fiery Locust Swarm, an anonymous source tipped off news agencies around the world. The source revealed that the Demon Sealing Faction had challenged the Fiery Locust Swarm to a faction war, which quickly spread online like wildfire. Forum threads and discussions about the challenge quickly filled every website and channel related to factions, but since Yuan was involved, it also spread to Cultivation online networks. In fact, news had spread so quickly that the Fiery Locust Swarm learned of the Demon Sealing Faction's challenge request to them through online forums before they even saw it in their personal notifications, which greatly shocked all of its members, sending the entire faction into a turmoil. Chapter 1457 Fiery Locust Swarms Response. Chapter 1457 Fiery Locust Swarms Response 1457 Fiery Locust Swarms Response. Miss Walker. There's been an emergency. A servant urgently knocked on Fiery Queen's bedroom door. The door opened a few moments later, and Fiery Queen stepped out of the room in her pajamas. What the hell is going on? She muttered in an irritated voice. The Demon Sealing faction has just issued a challenge to the Fiery Locust Swarm. The servant stammered, his words heavy with the news. Demon Sealing faction? Fiery Queen did not immediately recognize the name and wore a puzzled look on her face. The Demon Sealing faction is the one founded by player Yuan. The servant elaborated. What? Player Yuan? Fiery Queen instantly recognized his name and almost choked on her saliva from shock. He challenged the Fiery Locust Swarm to a faction war. Why would he suddenly do this? Fiery Queen suddenly recalled that Yuan's little sister was part of by Lianhua's faction. That little bitch must have cried to her brother about it. Wait a minute. Fiery Queen's anxiousness abruptly disappeared when she realized another thing. How many members does the Demon Sealing faction have, again? Last I checked, they only had 11 members, she asked the servant, who quickly pulled out his phone and started typing. According to the database, they only have 12 members. Only 12 members? Fiery Queen held a dumbfounded look on her face after hearing this information. After a moment of silence, she burst out laughing. Ha! 12. They're challenging the Fiery Locust Swarm with just 12 people. They must be out of their damn minds. Fuck, I was actually worried for a second there because of player Yuan. This is actually great news since there's no way they could defeat the Fiery Locust Swarm in a faction war. Even if player Yuan's cultivation is at Spirit King, it won't help him defeat 1,000 people, much less 40,000, and he will surely make a mistake and get himself disqualified. Fiery Queen clenched her fists in excitement at this chance to defeat player Yuan once and for all. Call Su Buqin for me, she said to her servant. After dialing Su Bokin's number, the servant handed his phone to her. Hello? Who's this? It's me. Miss Walker. I was expecting your call. You must be calling because of the Demon Sealing faction's challenge request to us. Yes, that's right. Just in case, what are the terms? Did they impose any limits? Well, they want to do siege mode with no player or cultivation limitation. They are also allowing martial techniques. Ah, no limitations. Are they insane? Have they even been keeping up to date with the rest of the world, or do they spend all of their time in? Do they truly believe they can defeat 40,000 players with just 12 in siege mode? Fiery Queen was not laughing alone at this moment. Countless people around the world were laughing at the Demon Sealing faction's seemingly foolish decision after seeing the terms, filling the internet with mockery. No player or cultivation limitation. Is the Demon Sealing faction that arrogant? Or are they simply insane? Do they realize that they'll have to defend their castle against 40,000 players with just 12? Honestly, they probably don't even know the rules since this is their first time participating in a faction war. But why pick the Fiery Locust Swarm, a top 100 faction, as their first target? Are they on bad terms with each other or something? They are probably doing this just for attention because they've become irrelevant. Or they're being paid. It's their own fault for losing relevance. Not only do they seem to have no intention of increasing their members, but they also don't participate in anything. Why did they even create the faction in the first place? Despite Yuan's popularity, few stood by him or defended his decision. In fact, some outright lost all respect for him, openly criticizing his choices. What a fucking arrogant bastard. He thinks he's invincible or something just because he got lucky in cultivation online. I cannot wait to see them being obliterated during the faction war. Get them good, Fiery Locust Swarm. Put them in their place. Su Buqin, I want you to accept their challenge. Fiery Queen said shortly after learning of the terms. Are you sure? What about the Eternal Lotuses? Forget about them. I am only messing with them because I cannot directly mess with player Yuan, and they're obviously supporting him. How about the faction war? Even though there are no player limitations, we should still set some limits to avoid being ridiculed for using a sledgehammer to crack open an egg. Who cares if you're ridiculed? Send everyone. I want you to completely and utterly destroy player Yuan and his faction. And it's better to be safe than sorry. Who knows what that tricky bastard has up his sleeves? What about the payment? Will you still pay us the rest of the money even though we won't be fighting Eternal Lotuses? Of course, I will still honor the rest of the payment. In fact, I will increase the payment depending on how much you humiliate them. The more satisfied I am, the more money I'm willing to give you. Ah, this is great. Thank you, Miss Walker. You will not be disappointed. Su Buqin laughed out loud. Then I will immediately respond to their challenge and accept it. Very well. Keep me updated. Of course. After hanging up, Su Buqin accepted the Demon Sealing Faction's challenge request. Ding. Fiery Locust Swarm has accepted your challenge. Please wait for your match to be scheduled. Mei Feng smiled when she saw this notification. Chairman Li had been staring at his screen since he sent out the challenge request, so he immediately saw the Fiery Locust Swarm's response. He swiftly picked up the phone and called Yuan to relay the news. Yes, they have responded and accepted your challenge. Of course, I will immediately schedule your match and call you back when I have a date. No, thank you. Chairman Li hung up and started working on his computer again. Chapter 1458 in 3 days? Chapter 1458 in 3 days 1458 in 3 days. Although Chairman Li could have scheduled the Demon Sealing Faction's faction war the next day, he wanted to give everyone a chance to prepare, so he scheduled the match to begin in 3 days. After pushing back a month's worth of scheduled faction wars, Chairman Li confirmed the match schedule and called Yuan to notify him of the news. Yes, the match will start at noon on the Great Battlefield in 3 days. I can guide you if you don't know how to get there. If we travel by plane, it's about 8 hours away from the Dragon Spiral Mountain. Thank you for the offer, but I already have people guiding me there, said Yuan. I understand. Then good night. After hanging up, Yuan called Mei Feng to notify her of the faction war. Yes, the Fiery Locust Swarm has accepted our challenge, and our match is scheduled to begin in 3 days at noon. Do you know how to get to the Great Battlefield? Yes, I do. Then can you bring the others there? I will meet you guys there. Of course. We'll see you there. Yuan hung up the phone, turned to look at Bai Lianhua and said, now that that's settled, let's get some rest tonight and start our training tomorrow. Okay, I'll get you a RO. Before Bai Lianhua could finish her sentence, Yu stood up and declared, Brother will sleep with me. My bed is big enough to fit 2 people comfortably too. Yuan looked at her with a bittersweet smile. Aren't you an independent adult now? That has nothing to do with us sleeping together like before. You owe me at the very least, this much for not visiting me sooner. Yuan sighed in a defeated voice. All right, we can sleep together. Good night, senior sister. Good night, Lianhua, Yuan said to her before following Yu to her room. They quickly lay in bed inside Yu's room but did not immediately go to sleep. Brother, what do you think's going to happen to our world? I can't say nothing will happen since we're already past that point, and there will surely be more changes in the future, but I will do my best to protect it from being harmed by foreign or domestic forces. I know that you're trying to protect the world, but please take care of yourself. You're much more important to the world for me, and if I had to choose to sacrifice one, I wouldn't hesitate to sacrifice the world if it means keeping you safe. Yu spoke in a low voice. Yuan smiled, I will do my best. They fell asleep shortly after while holding hands. Early in the morning the following day, Bai Lianhua gathered every member in her faction, which numbered in the thousands at the training grounds. Once everyone gathered, Bai Lianhua began speaking. I'm sure most if not all of you heard this by now, that our opponent, Fiery Locust Swarm, has been challenged by the Demon Sealing Faction. If you're wondering why they would do something like that, you can ask the person who challenged the Fiery Locust Swarm himself, as he will be training with us for the next several days. What? Did this happen last night? Player Yuan is here. I knew my eyes weren't playing tricks on me and that I saw him yesterday. Where is Player Yuan right now? A stir of commotion rippled through the crowd. He should be arriving at any moment. I'm here. Yuan's voice suddenly resounded, causing everyone there to turn their heads to stare at him like a group of seagulls before food. Seeing how much attention he was getting from females, Yu, who was beside him, frowned slightly. Is really Player Yuan? You're my idol, Player Yuan? Are you really going to train with us? Yuan jumped onto one of the stages there and started answering their questions. Please just call me Yuan. Yes, I will be training with you guys to prepare for the upcoming faction war with the Fiery Locust Swarm. Why did you challenge the Fiery Locust Swarm? Did you do it to help us? Someone raised a hand and asked. As a friend of Bai Lianhua, I cannot sit still when her beloved faction is being bullied. Not to mention that my precious little sister is also part of the faction. However, I am not doing this for a noble cause, so I don't deserve any gratitude you may feel toward me. How confident are you in defeating the fiery locust swarm? I saw the terms and it doesn't play to your advantage. Someone else expressed their worry. Yuan smiled and said, I won't say that victory is guaranteed, but I am confident in our abilities. Isn't this the demon-sealing faction's first time participating in a faction war? How can you be confident in something you've never experienced? While I may not have any experience in faction wars, I certainly know a thing or two about fighting a large number of opponents at once. Sometime later, after answering several more questions, Yuan said, anyways, let's talk about our training now. For training, I'm going to be sparring with everyone here, but we're going to treat it as though we are in a faction war, such as representing our life with a badge by the waist. Everyone here will have exactly 30 seconds to take my life. If you successfully do so, I will reward you a divine rank technique. What? Everyone there expressed immense shock after hearing his words. Also, I won't use any techniques and I won't attack you for the first 30 seconds. Once I start attacking, if you are able to keep your life for 10 seconds, I will reward you with a divine rank technique, so you'll have 2 chances to receive the reward. What? They cried out loud again. Are you serious? You won't go back on your words, right? Yuan chuckled and said, I promise you that I am serious. Yu nodded, I vouch for my brother's integrity. Me too. Bai Lianhua also chimed in. Hearing this, the others cheered loudly, causing the place to tremble with their volume alone. Chapter 1459 Training with Eternal Lotuses? Chapter 1459 Training with Eternal Lotuses 1459 Training with Eternal Lotuses. After the announcement, members of the Eternal Lotuses started going onto the stage to spar with Yuan. You are free to use any martial technique you want, and don't hold back, Yuan said to the short young lady standing a few meters in front of him. You may begin whenever you are ready. A few seconds later, the young lady flew forward and started swinging her sword at Yuan without reservation, her eyes as fierce as a tiger's as she unleashed her most powerful martial technique. The young lady was a 7th level spirit warrior, so even her most powerful attack posed no threat to Yuan, who easily dodged it. As he continued dodging her attacks, Yuan lectured her about the mistakes in her movements and swordsmanship and even told her the method for fixing them. 30 seconds passed in the blink of an eye for the spectators and the fighters on the stage, and Yuan announced, I will be aiming for your life now. He raised his wooden training sword and closed their distance in an instant. Wah! Before the young lady could even react, Yuan stabbed his sword directly at the wooden badge hanging around her waist, destroying it. In less than a second, Yuan had taken her life. This greatly shocked the spectators, as none of them were able to follow Yuan's movements when he attacked. Wow! Did anyone see what just happened? Even though I stared at him without blinking, I couldn't see his movement until after Head destroyed her badge. It's as though he stopped time or something. Did he use a technique or is he simply just that fast? Next. Yuan ignored the side comments and called for the next challenger. Since the Eternal Lotuses had around 5,000 members, he had very little time to spare if he wanted to spar with everyone there before the faction war. Time passed quickly, and an entire day had passed before anyone realized it. Yuan continuously sparred with the members there without any breaks from day to night. After hundreds of matches, nobody could destroy Yuan's badge, and nobody there could last more than 5 seconds when Yuan started attacking. I will stay on this stage until nobody is willing to challenge me, or I have to leave for the faction war, Yuan declared, dumbfounding the members there. However, they also saw this as a chance. They thought that if Yuan continued sparring with them, he would eventually get tired and make mistakes. Thus, the Eternal Lotuses continued sparring with Yuan throughout the entire night. Sometime in the afternoon on the second day, the Eternal Lotuses members noticed Yuan's movements getting slower. He also wasn't instantly destroying their badges. Yes, he must be getting tired. It's only a matter of time before he's exhausted and makes a mistake. The girls clenched their fists in excitement, and their motivation to defeat him peaked. Yuan continued to grow increasingly slower and more sluggish with his movements throughout the day. Yet, nobody was close to destroying his badge or lasting more than 10 seconds during his offense. How come we're unable to defeat him even though he's clearly exhausted? Is he really exhausted though? What if he's just messing with us? No way, but he's been fighting thousands of matches without any rest. Even a spirit lord would get tired. Suddenly, a familiar face entered the stage to face Yuan. "It's my turn, brother Yuan." Yu greeted him with a smile. Yuan smiled back and said, "Let me see how much you've grown." Just like in Cultivation Online, Yu's choice of weapon was the fan. "You know, one of the Demon Sealing faction members also wields the fan," Yuan said. Omicronim, "Oh really?" "Yes. If he participates in the faction war, you'll be able to see him fight. Maybe you'll even learn a thing or two." "I can't wait." Not wanting to let Yuan rest for another second, Yu suddenly used a movement technique to close their distance. "Your movements aren't bad, but they could be better, sharper," Yuan said as he turned his head around to face Yu, who was already swinging her fan at his face. However, halfway into her strike, Yu activated her movement technique again. "I got you now." Yu smiled inwardly when Yuan didn't follow her movements a second time and was still staring at her previous location. However, right as her fan was able to smack him in the back of the head, Yuan casually moved his arm to block the incoming strike with a single finger. Wah! Yuan's eyes shifted to stare at her, emitting an intense pressure. Sensing his gaze, Yu's entire body trembled, and without hesitation, she jumped back to distance herself from him. "Not bad, Yu. If you hadn't backed away just now, I would have taken your life." Yuan smiled and continued, "Also, you're the first one to aim for my head instead of my badge, and that strike contained enough strength to break someone's skull. Can you blame me?" "You did tell us not to hold back," she responded with a stiff smile. "You're right, and I am not blaming you. Come, you've got another 15 seconds left." He beckoned her with the finger he used to block her strike. Yu nodded and quickly approached him again. 15 seconds passed, but Yu was unable to break his badge. "My turn now." Yuan used his movement technique for the first time, disappearing into thin air like a ghost. "Wah! Where did he go?" Yu was left baffled by his disappearance. A split second later, she sensed a weird sensation coming from her waist, causing her to look down. That was when she realized her badge had been destroyed. "Wow. I thought he would go easy on her because she's his little sister, but he took her life in less than a second." The spectators were amazed by Yuan's movement technique, which allowed him to get behind Yu like a ghost. "I knew you were acting tired, brother." Yu turned around to look at him with a bittersweet smile. Yuan chuckled, "You guys were starting to slack off, so I had to motivate you guys again." The next person to enter the stage was another familiar face. "I don't care about the divine rank technique, so let's have a proper spar without the 30-second time limit," Lianhua said as she stepped onto the stage. Yuan nodded, "Sure." Chapter 1460 Sparring with Lianhua. Chapter 1460 Sparring with Lianhua. 1460 Sparring with Lianhua. "Whenever you are ready," Yuan said as he casually stood on the stage with a calm smile on his face. Lianhua readied her sword and took a deep breath before dashing at Yuan at full speed. Ha! Lianhua began their confrontation with a quick sword thrust that aimed straight at the spot between Yuan's eyebrows. She expected Yuan to easily dodge her strike, and he did, so without delay she immediately raised her right leg to kick his waist, aiming for his badge. However, right as her feet reached his badge, Yuan's hand appeared out of thin air and grabbed onto her leg. Seeing that she had been caught, Lianhua hastily pulled her feet back but quickly realized that she did not have the strength to break out of Yuan's hold. Yet, she did not panic and swung her sword at his face for a second time. However, she was forced to stop mid-swing when Yuan abruptly lifted her into the air and swung her around like a cowboy with a rope. "W-ah! Yuan?" Lianhua cried out loud. A few more circles later, Yuan tossed her to the other side of the stage. After barely landing on her feet, Lianhua looked at Yuan with wide eyes, seemingly in disbelief about what had just transpired. The spectators also couldn't believe their eyes. But can you treat our fight more seriously?" Lianhua asked with a sigh. "It's him?" "But I am," he said with a nonchalant expression. Lianhua was speechless. After a moment of silence, she clenched her sword and charged at him again. This time she kept her distance and used a martial technique. Illusion Sword Arts. Lianhua propelled her sword in a stabbing motion, aimed at Yuan's forehead again. However, from the spectator's view, there were several swords flying at Yuan, almost as though Lianhua grew a few extra arms. "There it is. Senior sister's illusion sword art." "Wow. She's managed to create 7 illusions. Yuan raised an eyebrow at the crowds, mumbling. 7 illusions? What are they talking about? He wondered inwardly as he couldn't see any illusions. Once Lianhua's sword almost reached him, Yuan casually swung his sword, deflecting the strike. He saw through it so easily. As expected of Yuan, not even senior sister can fool him. Unbeknownst to them, Yuan's soul strength was so high that Lianhua's illusion sword arts were completely ineffective against him. In fact, Yuan thought he had to defend against invisible attacks. Lianhua sucked her teeth after seeing how easily Yuan had blocked one of her stronger techniques. Okay, let's fight for real now. Lianhua released her cultivation base, filling the headquarters with the aura of a peak spirit lord. Yuan nodded and also released his cultivation. Even though he was only a peak spirit grandmaster, the aura and pressure he exuded were far superior to Lianhua's, who was an entire realm higher. The spectators subconsciously distanced themselves from the stage. Here I come. Lianhua warned as she flew at him, unleashing a series of powerful sword techniques. Yuan did not back away, even approaching her as he blocked and deflected all of her strikes with ordinary sword swings. However, since his wooden sword could not handle Lianhua's spiritual energy alone, he had to cover it with his own energy. Over the next several minutes, Lianhua showcased all of her techniques and experience without holding anything back. On the other hand, Yuan only casually swung his sword without any techniques. However, his thousands of years of experience in combat was overwhelming and as clear as day even to the inexperienced. Several more minutes later, using nothing but ordinary sword techniques, Yuan cornered Lianhua and made her feel completely hopeless. It's your win. Lianhua dropped her sword and forfeited. Yuan lowered his sword and both withdrew their cultivation bases. The moment their spiritual energy dispersed, the wooden sword in Lianhua's grasp cracked. Meanwhile, the sword in Yuan's grasp exploded into thousands of tiny fragments. Seeing this, Lianhua sighed, I couldn't even get you to use a single technique. I'm simply too weak. Yuan shook his head and said, Don't feel bad. Unless you've practiced sword techniques since you were young, you're already very good with the sword at your age. What about you? Does that mean you've been practicing sword techniques even before you were born? She asked in a joking tone. He smiled. Something like that. He then swept the crowd with a calm gaze and asked, Does anyone else want to spar? You should get some rest, Yuan. After all, the faction war between Demon Sealing Faction and Fiery Locust Swarm is tomorrow. I will rest as soon as everyone gets their chance to spar with me. After sparring for a few more hours, Yuan spent the rest of the day teaching Yu how to wield her fan properly. Since when did you learn to use the fan, brother? I thought you only learned to use the sword and dagger. Yu asked him after seeing how perfectly he handled the fan. He casually lied, I trained with several other weapons during my spare time, such as the fan and spear. In reality, the god of war had complete mastery over every weapon in existence, and Yuan merely remembered how to use them after regaining Xian's memories. Later that night, Yuan left the headquarters of Eternal Lotuses with Yu Lianhua, and Xia Jingyi, Yu's friend, who joined the Eternal Lotuses at the same time. Good luck, Yuan. Give those bastards a good beating. I know you can do it. Sometime later. It's been a while, Yuan. Sorry I didn't spar with you. As a zither cultivator, I have a mostly support role, so it would be a waste of time to spar with you, Xia Jingyi said to him as they made their way to the airport. Yuan casually waved his hand and said, Don't worry, I understand your special position. Zither cultivators are not suited for one-on-one until you have a high enough cultivation after all. Chapter 1461 The Great Battlefield? Chapter 1461 The Great Battlefield 1461 The Great Battlefield. Don't look down on her because she cannot fight one-on-one, brother Yuan. She's an excellent supporter and an even better fighter when it comes to fighting in groups. Yu suddenly said. Her buffs are amazing, and her zither arts allow her to fight multiple people at once. She's the perfect supporter. Lianhua nodded in agreement. Yes, she's a valuable asset to the faction, so much so that many have tried to poach her from us. Yuan smiled and said, I wasn't looking down on her. Xia Jingyi blushed from all their praises and said in a bashful voice, You're giving me too much credit, Yu. Although my zither arts can cover a large area, I lack control, so I am often disqualified for accidentally injuring the opponents too much. That's true for now, but if you keep practicing, you'll eventually reach a level where you can destroy many badges at once from a distance. You'll be unstoppable then. Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly, his lips curling into a mysterious smile as he absorbed Yu Rao's words. Xia Jinji shook her head and sighed. That's easier said than done. Attacking several people at once, precisely at that, requires a tremendous amount of spiritual energy and perfect control. That could take decades of practice, and I am not sure I have the talents for it. Have some faith in yourself, Sister Jingy. You definitely have the talent for it. Eventually they arrived at the airport. Bai Lianhua, who had a private jet stationed at this airport, entered through the back door with the others. We'll arrive at the great battlefield in 6 hours. Bai Lianhua said as they boarded the jet. Wow, this is my first time flying on a private jet, said Xia Jingy, who looked around excitedly. Yuan and Yu Rou had their fair share of experience with private jets in the Yu family, especially Yuan, who used it the most to travel around the world for his music concerts. Sometime later, the plane started moving and quickly ascended into the clouds. The spiritual energy in the sky is much cleaner and denser than it is on the ground, so you should use this opportunity to improve your cultivation. Bai Lianhua said to Yu Rou and Xia Jingy. Yes. Unfortunately for Yuan and Bai Lianhua, their cultivation was simply too high for Earth, so they could only efficiently cultivate through treasures from the 9 heavens. Bai Lianhua retrieved several spirit stones and offered a few to Yuan, saying, Do you want some? Yuan shook his head with a smile. Thank you, but I would need millions of spirit stones to increase even a single level. That much? Bai Lianhua's eyes widened with shock. But you're only a spirit grandmaster. Even I don't need that many spirit stones to break through as a spirit lord. My boat is a little unique. I don't doubt that. Bai Lianhua chuckled. Go ahead and cultivate without me. I'll give you a little boost. Yuan suddenly said. Huh? What do you mean? Bai Lianhua looked at him with raised eyebrows in a questioning manner. Yuan retrieved the soul-ensnaring zither and replied, You will find out in a moment. Just start cultivating. Bai Lianhua nodded and closed her eyes to cultivate. A few minutes later, once Bai Lianhua was absorbed in her cultivation, Yuan looked at his zither and took a deep breath before playing it. When Bai Lianhua heard the music, she found herself oddly more relaxed and comfortable instead of being distracted by it, allowing her to concentrate even better than before. It's much easier cultivating. Bai Lianhua quickly realized the effects of Yuan's profound music. Yu Rou and Xia Jingy were also shocked by this realization. To increase one's cultivation speed through music, he's truly on a different level. Xia Jingy was left in awe. Yuan played the zither non-stop for the entire 6-hour flight, greatly assisting the others' cultivation. Xia Jingy even experienced a breakthrough, entering the 9th level of Spirit Master. Thank you, Yuan. I was able to break through much sooner than expected because of your music. She thanked him after the jet landed. I didn't even know improving another's cultivation speed with zither art was possible. You've opened my eyes again. Bai Lianhua said. Do you think you can teach Sister Jingy? Yu Rou asked. I don't think that's necessary. Xia Jingy quickly said. However, Yuan shook his head and said, Even if I want to teach her, this isn't something that can be taught. After all, it isn't as simple as giving her a sheet of musical notes to play with. It's not the song that matters, but how you incorporate your spiritual energy, emotions and experience into your performance. Emotions and experience? How does one do that? Yu Rou asked out of curiosity. For example, anyone can sing a love song, but those who understand the essence of love and are able to express it through their voice will typically sound better than someone who has never experienced love. When I performed just now, I incorporated my cultivation experience into my zither arts. But there's no need to worry. She will eventually learn it as long as she continues to practice. Well, I didn't know zither art was so complicated. Sister Jingy always makes it seem so easy. My respect for you just increased, Sister Jingy. Sometime later they deboarded the jet. As he walked down the steps and approached the vehicle parked beside the jet, Yuan used his divine sense to quickly sweep the entire island. The island was massive and resembled a resort. It had an airport, several docks for those traveling by sea, a section that had hundreds of hotels, a marketplace, a food court, and last but not least, 6 distinct arenas, each for a specific faction war mode. This place is quite crowded, Yuan muttered out loud. That's natural. The great battlefield has millions of unique visitors every day. Bai Lianhua said. Anyway, where are we meeting the others? They haven't arrived yet and should be arriving soon. Let's get some food first, shall we? Okay. Chapter 1462 Fewer than anticipated. Chapter 1462 Fewer than anticipated. 1462 Fewer than anticipated. After leaving the airport, Yuan and the others ventured to the food court, a bustling hub housing over 100 restaurants offering diverse cuisines from around the world. However, before they left the airport, Yuan handed everyone there an appearance-altering pill to hide their identity, as Yuan had learned his lesson several days ago and didn't want to be recognized. Upon arriving at the food court, spent nearly an hour exploring the place before finally settling on a steakhouse. Half an hour into their dining, Yuan received a text message notifying him of her arrival. "We have arrived at the Great Battlefield." Yuan responded with their location. "We're currently dining in the food court at Spirit Steakhouse. We will be there shortly." "They have landed and will be coming here," Yuan said to the others as they savored the juicy steaks before them. An hour later, Mei Feng showed up with the Demon Sealing faction, at least those who planned on participating in the faction war. By the time Mei Feng showed up, Yuan and the others had already finished eating and were waiting for them outside the restaurant. Of course, he told her about their disguise. "This is everyone?" Yuan stared at Mei Feng and her group with a raised eyebrow. "I'm sorry, young master, but the others haven't logged off." Mei Feng sighed. Yuan silently looked at the members who had followed Mei Feng. There was Wang Bingbing, Shi Lang and Wu Zhao. 3 people in total. "Seriously? You're going to fight the fiery locust swarm with this many people?" Bai Lianhua was speechless. Yuan nodded. "Although this is fewer than I'd anticipated, for is more than enough. If I could, I would even fight them alone." "What do you mean for, young master?" "I'm also participating, you know," Mei Feng suddenly said. You really don't have to, Miss Mei Feng. I don't want you to feel like you need to fight for us. After all, you're already doing enough as our caretaker and manager." "Nonsense. If you're worried about me, that I cannot fight, allow me to remind you who taught Meishio how to fight." "That's right, it was me." Yuan showed a bittersweet smile and said, "That's not it, Miss Mei Feng. I'm not doubting your ability in combat. I just thought you wouldn't be interested in something like faction wars." "Now why would you assume that? I have been anticipating the day we participated in one since I started studying about factions. In fact, if you hadn't brought it up, I would have mentioned it sooner or later." Mei Feng responded with a slight smile. "Is that so?" Yuan was speechless. "Anyway, while I said that, I shall take the role of ruler during the faction war since I have the lowest cultivation base among us," she said. Yuan nodded. "Okay. By the way, we still have some time before the faction war. You should grab some food here before then." "It's okay, we ate on the flight here. We should take this time to plan for the faction war," Wang Bingbing said. "Plan? Do we really need a plan?" Yuan asked. "Of course. How else are we going to deal with 40,000 people with just the 5 of us?" Yuan then said, "I was going to let you guys have some fun before I step in." "Let us have some fun? How confident are you in defeating them? I know you're strong enough to kill all of them in a real fight, but we cannot harm them too much in a faction war." Wu Zhao asked. "I am aware. Don't worry about winning or how I'll deal with them. Just enjoy your own battle." Mei Feng then said, "I have watched all of their previous matches. They won't send all of their members at once and will probably try to drag it out. Why don't we talk elsewhere? Preferably somewhere quieter," Shi Lang said. They left the food court and went to a nearby park. Although the place was also crowded, it wasn't as noisy as the food court. Like I was saying, the fiery locust swarm most likely won't try to finish the faction war too quickly, so they'll send their members slowly. After all, they have plenty of people to spare, and the spectators would crucify them for ending it so soon," Mei Feng said. "That makes sense." Yuan nodded and continued, "Moreover, they're working for Fiery Queen. She'll definitely use this chance to humiliate me as revenge for what I did to her in Cultivation Online." He turned to look at Wang Bingbing and the others and said, "Just consider this faction war as part of your training. In fact, let's make this into a little game. Excluding me, whoever gets the most kills during the faction war will receive an ancient rank martial technique from me." Wang Bingbing's eyes flickered with excitement after hearing this and she asked, "Is that it? No restrictions?" He shook his head. "Do you have any ancient rank martial techniques for a fan wielder like me?" Wu Zhao asked. "Of course. What about me? I won't be able to fight as the ruler." Mei Feng said. Yuan smiled and said, if you want any specific technique, just let me know. Do you have any spear techniques? Oh? You've decided to use the spear? She nodded. It was either the spear or the staff since I spent a lot of time wielding a broom and mop. Why you decided your weapon based on that? Yuan looked at her with wide eyes. She merely nodded with a slight smile. Sometime later, Yuan received a phone call from Chairman Li. Have you guys arrived at the Great Battlefield yet? Chairman Li asked. Yes. Can you start making your way to Arena 1? I will give you a quick briefing before the faction war begins. Alright, we will start heading there now. Then I will see you soon. After hanging up, Yuan and the others started making their way to Arena 1, which also happens to be the largest arena on the island. If you find any errors, ads pop up, ads redirect, broken links, non-standard content, etc. Chapter 1463 Faction War Rules. Chapter 1463 Faction War Rules. 1463 Faction War Rules. As Yuan and the others approached Arena 1, they were met with the sight of a sea of people clamoring to enter the arena. Heavens, there are a lot more people today than usual. There are probably millions of people in line, Yu muttered in a dazed voice when she saw the crowded scene. It's no surprise, and I'd wager that everyone here has come to witness the Demon Sealing Faction's debut, Lianhua remarked with a calm smile. After taking a moment to scan the scene with his divine sense, Yuan found Chairman Li standing by the second entrance meant for participants. Of course, the 40,000 members of Fiery Locust Swarm were also there, trying to enter the arena. Yuan and the others approached the entrance. Chairman Li noticed Mei Feng first due to her maid outfit and beauty. I have been waiting for you. Let's go to your room first, he said to them. Okay. The members of the Fiery Locust Swarm stared at Chairman Li and the others with raised eyebrows. Who are they? How come the chairman of the Cultivators Association is personally greeting them at the entrance? I don't recognize them. Due to Yuan and the other notable identities still being disguised, nobody from the Fiery Locust Swarm recognized them as their upcoming opponent, the Demon Sealing Faction. Once Chairman Li led Yuan and his group inside the arena, the Fiery Locust Swarm quickly stopped thinking about it and resumed talking about their upcoming match. I still cannot believe that the Demon Sealing Faction would challenge us with a mere dozen people. Just what are they thinking? They've probably gone mad from playing too much. I never thought the day I would contribute to player Yuan's defeat would ever come, but it's so close I can already taste it. Sometime later, Yuan and the others sat down before a long round table inside a spacious office. I've been wondering this since I saw you guys, but where are the rest? There are only 8 of you. Chairman Li asked. Chem? Oh no, we're not members of the Demon Sealing Faction. Lianhua said, and she proceeded to remove her disguise. White Lotus. Yu and Xia Jingyi also removed their disguise. W8, so there are only 5 members from the Demon Sealing Faction? Are the others okay? Yuan removed his disguise and nodded. Yes, they are fine, but they won't be participating in the faction war. Excuse me? Chairman Li stared at him with wide eyes filled with disbelief. He slowly counted the people in the room, excluding those from Eternal Lotuses. After counting 5 of them, he started counting again just in case he miscounted. 5 of you. Are you really planning on fighting the Fiery Locust Swarm with just the 5 of you? Chairman Li found the situation too absurd to believe. Yes. There shouldn't be any problems, right? After all, you technically only need 2 people to participate in the siege mode. There's no problem, but I know what you're thinking, but have some faith in us. Also, as this will be the Demon Sealing Faction's first appearance, we should make it as shocking as possible. It will definitely be shocking, but unless you defeat the Fiery Locust Swarm, it won't be the good kind. Chairman Li shook his head. Anyways, I won't say anything else on this topic since it won't change anything. Instead, let me brief you about your upcoming faction war. He retrieved several pieces of paper and handed them to the Demon Sealing Faction members. The first page explains the rules of siege mode. First and foremost, you are forbidden from seriously injuring or killing a player. While accidents happen, you will still be held responsible and removed from the faction war. If you purposefully try to seriously harm or kill another player, your faction will automatically be disqualified, which will be considered as a loss, and you will also be forbidden from participating in another match for 4 years. Next, the match will have a 6-hour time limit. If neither faction is able to kill the other's ruler in 6 hours, the faction with the most players alive will be declared the victor. Weapons will be provided to the players, so they are forbidden from bringing their own weapons. In fact, you are prohibited from bringing anything that wasn't provided to you into the match. Hearing this, Yuan asked, "Is it possible for an individual to bring more than one weapon into the match?" "Yes, just write down your desired weapons in the weapon request form on the next page." Anyways, continuing with the rules, you are forbidden from using any martial techniques that are considered deadly. Wu Zhao raised his hand and asked, "What do you consider to be deadly?" "If you ask me, any martial technique can be considered deadly if used by the right person." Chairman Li replied, "Any techniques that attack indiscriminately, cannot be controlled or always result in serious injuries are considered deadly." Everyone there turned to look at Yuan. All of his martial techniques could be considered deadly since he could easily kill someone with them. Don't worry. In order to use a martial technique in the match, you must acquire approval first so you'll know what you can and cannot use. Before the faction war begins, you may showcase any martial technique that you wish to use during the match before 3 judges. As long as you can prove that you have sufficient control over your technique and that you won't easily injure someone, you should be able to use any technique you want. However, the stronger the martial technique, the stricter the evaluation. Oh, that's good to know. Last rule. You are prohibited from consuming any performance-enhancing drugs before the match. If you are caught doing such a thing, you will be banned from participating in another match for the rest of your life. Chairman Li spoke with a heavy tone. After the system update, there have been many incidents of players consuming performance-enhancing drugs right before their match, giving them an unfair advantage, and it has led to several accidents that resulted in the death of players. However, since their world has yet to discover a reliable method of detecting such things, many players are still abusing such methods to have a higher chance of victory despite the risks. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.